Hi, wrestling fans. This is Bill Dundee. So when you're around town, you tune in to IYHWrestling.com, and I promise you won't be disappointed.
All right, we're back. Welcome to In Your Head Wrestling Radio. I am the internet icon and the man just crazy enough to let George South speak for 3 hours, Jackie Jones. Along with my right-hand man.
1-inch biceps, the power goat.
Well, guys, I tell you, man, I'll get started. I'm very, very excited. I got the kids outside with the front door locked, so I've got plenty of time here, guys.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Just so everybody knows here, we are joined by the. I think this is his 4th or 5th appearance. I've lost count, but it doesn't matter. He's like a family member here at In Your Head.
Family, that's right, buddy. I'm the one that shows up at supper time when ain't nobody expecting it.
Right. The one and only, the last wrestler himself, and co-author of Dad, You Don't Work, You Wrestle. We got George South with us. How are you doing?
Buddy, I'm doing great. Thank y'all so much for having me on here again. I'm very, very excited. I look forward to this all day. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you back here. Well, we'll let everybody know right off the bat here. If you want to buy the book, you go to georgesouthbook.com. Well, we have a link right up on the website, and it's a hell of a book. And what has been like the reaction been to?
It's been great. I knew all the years in the business I had always took notes and on napkins, or if I seen something that happened in the dressing room that I thought was pretty neat, I thought, man, I just made notes of it. And it's just amazing. Timing's everything, and I just kept all these notes and stuff all these years, and I knew once I wrote it, I was joking with people that my grandbaby saw it and loved the picture on the front. So that's all the review I needed. I didn't care if anybody else liked it or not, but I knew, I've read a lot of the other books and I loved a lot of them, but I knew that, I had a little story and, nothing dark, nothing bad. I've actually had people wondering why there's nothing dark, sad in my book. And I'm thinking, buddy, are you crazy? So I just knew that if I ever had a chance, I was going to put some stuff together, and because it's been the greatest ride that I could ever imagine. I mean, a little old boy that started off watching wrestling, land on his grandma's floor. Dreams do come true, guys, and I just hope people get a hold of this book. I've had tremendous response on this thing, and I want people to laugh. I want people to see that wrestling is the greatest thing one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, and I've loved it. I still love it after all these years.
Mm-hmm. You say, there's no dark stuff in the book. Would you just say really that's your overall, perception of your wrestling career was, there might be stuff bad happened to you, whatnot, but overall you lived your dream and you're proud to be part of it?
And, I look at, the biggest reason this book was written, of course, I wrote it for my kids and just a lot of good friends, but I wrote it for a lot of the wrestlers that I loved and meant so much to me. I learned more, riding in the back seat of an old-timer's car than I ever learned in high school. I'll tell you that right now. And so it's almost like, a gift back to those guys, and just what they meant to me. A lot of them's been forgotten, but it's just something I felt a little bit of what some of those guys did, having to be on the road all the time and, missing birthday parties and football games and graduations because you had to go on the road. Because, of course, then if you didn't pay your bills. You didn't feed your family. So I really wanted to pay tribute to a lot of those guys. It was just a unique business. If I could go back, guys, Jack, I just wish I could have slowed down a little bit, because I was a cocky 18-year-old telling, Lou Thez what I was going to do to him. And, of course, he changed my mind pretty quick. But if I could go back, I would slow down a little bit, and really enjoy it. And, I mean, I enjoyed it, but there was so much that I just rushed through, and a lot of the guys have passed away, and I've tried to recapture all that. And the response I get with some of the feedback is, and that's, it's hit the nail on the head. A lot of the fans have just said, man, that made me think about how I used to feel about pro wrestling. And that's what I wanted. I wanted guys, the Ricky Steamboats and the Paul Joneses and Blackjack. I wanted it to mean something to them, not just me, and it has. So, because them old timers, they don't pull any punches. If they don't like it, they're going to tell you.
Right.
So the greatest compliment I got was I sent Ole Anderson one, and I love Ole. Now, and I even write in the book, the difference between Ole and anybody else is most people talk behind your back. Ole just tells you to your face you don't like it, But I had sent Ole one, and he told me, he said, it's too preachy. He said, if you take away all the preaching, there's only like 10 pages about wrestling. And I love that. So, the Lord has just been so good to me, and it's just been an amazing, amazing life. And I actually, when we first sat down, and, you don't know where to begin. If you want to do a book or something, you just got to have the right people. And Mark James has just been a tremendous blessing. I mean, I met him at FanFest. We were talking about it earlier, and he said, you ought to do a book. Said, you probably got a story. And, of course, I said, Mark, I thought about it, but, man, I just think, I wouldn't even know where to begin. He said, well, just do it. That was his simple words. And it's just amazing how things come together. And I give Mark James as much credit on this book than anybody. For anybody that's brave enough to spend a year with me, they got to be crazy or either love pro wrestling one. So that's how it all came together. So I'm as proud for Mark as I am for me, because he was just such a tremendous help on this book.
You said you took notes. 'Cause I was actually going to ask you about that. Did you keep them all together, in a certain place, or did you have to go and
Well, what was so amazing is shoe boxes. I'm the most unorganized person in the world, and I'd lose my kids if they didn't yell at me every now and then. But I just sometimes, honestly, wrist tape was all I'd have in the dressing room. The story in my book about Road Warrior Hawk, he just got tired of some of the underneath guys getting beat up real bad and hurt. And one time in the dressing room, he decided to say something about it. And it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen, because nobody, Steamboat had took up for the underneath guys a lot, but during the WCW, the early days, nobody took up for the underneath guys. Guys were getting hurt. They were bringing in top guys, supposedly top guys, that couldn't work a lick. And the underneath guys were getting hurt, and Boy Hawk decided to say something. And, when something like that's happening, it's like a volcano erupting. You ain't got time to ask anybody to have a notepad, Mm-hmm. So I just grabbed and wrist tape, whatever I could write down, how much. I just thought that was neat that somebody spoke up for the underneath guys. And so I was actually taking notes off of wrist tape, old wrist tape to put in this book. So a lot of times it was popcorn boxes. So when I was able to, sit down with Mark and, of course, Debbie Jewell, who was just a tremendous help, and I never even, knew how to type. I couldn't even get on a computer. And they just took it slowly and just went through my papers and notes, and here it is. Mm-hmm. So I turned in 700 pages, believe it or not. The book's
really?
Right out close to 400, but I turned in the 700 pages to Mark James, and I didn't think he was ever going to call me back. He said, buddy, you're crazy. So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I just wonder what would have been the reaction been if you or somebody would have went to management or whatever and said, this guy's too rough in the ring. Would they have just not used you or?
Yeah, and back then you didn't say nothing. That's why if the business, and I know we've all heard this so many times it probably gets old, but if the business was like it was, 95% of the guys that are in it now wouldn't have survived. You can say being on TV and all that stuff, you wouldn't have made it, to TV. And, of course, back then, you really took care of yourself. You had to, because you'd get some guy in there, and many, many times I was put with guys that you basically had to even show them how to lace their boots up. And you're sitting there thinking, buddy, it may be time to find another line of work, so it's just, but you couldn't say nothing. A lot of those guys were really, really stiff, and, that's why the one thing, when I hear somebody say that wrestling is fake or it's a work, that makes me madder than a hornet, because I've seen a lot of guys get hurt. I've seen, I have people say, well, you don't try to kill the other guy. And I said, well, no, smart aleck, that is against the law. You can't kill somebody. But it's a tough business. And I've just seen a lot of guys get hurt. So when someone did speak up, like Hawk or Steamboat, man, it stuck with me. And that was many, many years ago. And that's why I was able to put stuff like that in this book. The most amazing thing when this book came out, that was the thing. People said, well, when do we get to the dark part? When do we get to to what you saw guys do, and that wasn't what my life was about. That wasn't what, I probably know a little something on everybody in the business, and they probably know something on me, but that ain't what this book's about. This book's about it was the greatest business in the world for me. And I've laughed more, I probably cried more, the only friends I even put in the book, if you'd have told me in high school that my two group of friends were going to be preachers or pro wrestlers, I'd have told you it's crazy. Yeah. So there's no middle ground. You get one or the other. So, and that's what I hope I've captured in this book. And, I just want people to remember those days of, when it was just simple, a bad guy and a good guy. And, it engulfed my life years ago to where I had it bad. You're talking about somebody that, for 15 years tried to convince his school teachers that I was Paul Jones, and you're thinking, what's this guy thinking? But that's how much it meant to me.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that's a big part of your life is your religion and your faith, and that's a big part of the book. And what's it like for you to to help someone find Jesus or?
Well, I love it, and I've always tried to, I've never, people say, well, you're going to beat me over the head with the Bible. And I'll say, no, I don't have to. I just, try to live a decent life. I mess up all the time. Let me tell you, I'm the biggest screw up in the world, but I know what the Lord has done for me, and that's all I'm able to do is just tell people, even in our business, there may have been jerks or, just really, buttholes in the wrestling business, but if they have treated me good, that's all you can go by. And so what I've been able to do over the years is just say, okay, I go by how these guys treat me. So I am living proof of, I can tell you, what the good Lord's done for me, and He's allowed me to have probably, just the most amazing life and career. And I tell you, and the good thing about it, if the career hadn't went the way it went, He's still God, and He still blesses me, and I love it. When I can see someone that just try, I talked to Jake Roberts one time, who I love to death. I walked up to Jake Roberts a few years ago and simply just asked him in the dressing room how he's doing. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and he says, you're the first person in 5 years that's asked me that. And guys, I'm getting real here, man. I just, you just take a deep breath. Mm-hmm. And he just opened up with me and shared with me, and it was just the greatest time talking with Jake about how when he really tried to straighten up the whole world, and y'all know this, I ain't telling the listeners nothing, the whole world came down on him. Mm-hmm. Calling him a hypocrite. They was even doing angles on TV where he was drinking, and just amazing. It just screwed up, and so that's what people are getting about this book here is they're thinking, man, ain't no darkness or nothing in there. And it's like people look for that, and so I just really have been there a lot to help a few of the guys, been able to pray with a lot of the guys in the dressing room. I put it in the book, one of the most amazing things to me, New Jack. I'm talking king of hardcore. And,
yeah.
This is during our Smoky Mountain time, and he'd just walk right up to me. Brother, when New Jack walks up to you in the dressing room, you better be for real, let me tell you. And he asked me, he said, are you a preacher? And, that meant something to me. And I said, no, New Jack. I said, but I love the Lord. He said, would you mind praying for me? Mm-hmm. And I tell you that, I shared that not to embarrass New Jack or anybody else, but, it just meant something to me. And we prayed together. So those little things like that meant more to me putting them in this book than any, darkness thing that I've ever seen. So, God is real. He's changed my life. And the biggest misconceptions people said for years, you can't be a pro wrestler, and be a Christian. Mm-hmm. And I've just, let them talk, but I've just continued to do what I've done. Not to be perfect or anything like that, but, there used to be an old joke in the dressing room back in the day that a guy would change his life and come to know the Lord, and then several of them supposedly was reading the Bible upside down one time in the dressing room, and so the old timers kind of ribbed them about it. So, asking was it real or wasn't, is it real? And I just always tried to, what people see. I had Eddie Guerrero. I put all this in the book. First time I met him, he saw a Bible in my wrestling bag and asked me. He said, is that just for show? And I'm thinking, man, who's this guy? But it started a friendship between me and him that lasted, 25 years. And so it's just, and even Vince McMahon has said, on TV several times about the guys, Ted DiBiase and those guys. Vince ain't never had a problem with a guy changing his life. Vince just wants it to be for real. And I'm right there with him for that. Mm-hmm. And we ain't perfect. You know, I mess up so many times. You know, my kids are sure to tell me that, let me tell you. But it's just I've been able to wrestle. I've been able to travel the world, meet some great, great guys. And, you know, just been able to see a few lives get changed. You know, the first page in there, when I sit down with that religious professor, who was kind of a smart aleck, his first question was, why do old wrestlers seem to find God when they lose everything else? And of course, you know, I ain't to be outdone in the smart aleck department, let me tell you guys. So I just came back at him and said, listen, that's because they find out that God ain't the only one that leaves them. And boy, he shut right up then. I even had one guy that bought the book said, why'd you put that on there, first page? I wanted people to see that, you know, you sit down and do some of these interviews. That's why I love y'all so much. You respect the business. There's a lot of interviews I've done so far with this book that 5 minutes after we started, I wanted to get off there because I knew where it was headed. You know, it was going to be, they wanted to make a joke of pro wrestling. And I guess there's a thing on the internet now where the 50 all-time job guys or something, I think some guy put it together or something. But anyway, and I've had a lot of emails, people saying, man, you made that list. Mm-hmm. And Jack, I'm thinking, that's not a bad thing. You know, I bought 3 houses getting beat up every week. That's not a bad thing. Right. That's not a bad thing. So it's just amazing the fans still, you know, I tell you, I put it in the book, some of the best underneath guys were the best guys on the card. And that's the part I miss, guys, is, you know, used to could sit out and watch. I put it in the book, you know, first time I met Jerry Lynn, who I absolutely love. I met him first time, I mean, he's been in the business for a while. I met him last year for the first time in North Carolina at his show. And me and Jimmy Valiant, believe it or not, was in the main event. And guess who pulled a metal chair out of the dressing room and came outside the dressing room door and watched the match? Jerry Lynn. Mm-hmm. And that was the most respectful thing that you can do to anybody. Maybe not to me, but to Jimmy Valiant. And Jerry Lynn watched. And see, back in the day, that's one way you could show respect, and not just respect, but you'd learn. But guys, you know that as well as I do. You go to these shows now, the guy who wrestles first match, he's gone home, you know, or he's got to go out there and text his girlfriend. You know, nobody's going to sit around and watch. And it was just a neat little respect thing, and I thanked him for doing that. And you don't see that, you know, anymore. I know that, and it's brought back memories of me. That's why I put that in that book about Jerry Lynn watching us, is I used to love that. I would be the last one, even the Jim Crockett TVs, the WWF TVs, and all the TVs I've done, I would always probably be the last guy to leave because I enjoyed it, just, you know, every part of it, you know, watching every match I could and learning from some of these guys. So it's just been an amazing, amazing thing.
Mm-hmm. We got a 478 area code on the line. Who is this?
Hey, brothers, this is Bruiser from Macon, Georgia.
All right, Bruiser, you're on with George South. You got a question?
Hey, Bruiser.
George. How you doing, brother?
Good. Thank you.
Cool. Got a couple quick questions for you. Okay. One, whether people know or not, you have a pretty sought-after wrestling collection. I was wanting to know what's your prized possession, and if there's anything you've had before you got rid of that you wish you still had. Plus, not too long ago, I saw the High Spots mid-card roundtable. I wanted to get your thoughts about that. I kind of got lost in the mix on that. Thought it was kind of a train wreck. But I wanted to hear your thoughts. And if you were to do a enhancement Hall of Fame, who are 5 people you would put in that Hall of Fame?
Man. You got your own TV. You got your own radio show, I think, don't you, Bruiser? No.
Yes, sir, Crimson Corner. Wow, you're making a blush.
No, I tell you, and you may have to bring the questions back up, but just to hit them real quick, you know, my collection, my museum is just something I started many, many years ago. I saw Walter McDaniels one time in the dressing room throw down his wrist tape. He'd just fought Ric Flair, and he was bleeding and sweating, and he come back, took the wrist tape off, and threw it on the floor, and I reached over and picked it up. That's one of the first things. Still got that wrist tape to this day. And it's a thing where it's just stuff that's meant the world to me. I mean, it started out in one room, and then it's grown all over the house now. But there's probably not one thing. I mean, of course, besides, you know, beyond wrestling, I cherish my Bible. I've had the same Bible for 32 years, if you can believe it. It's held together by duct tape and tape and glue and everything else. So that's probably my most cherished thing. But the wrestling, of course, Wahoo's headdress, a lot of the stuff that the guys ain't here no more, and you could never get that stuff again. Just an amazing, I've got one of the original Gorgeous George's bobby pins, and that he threw to the crowd. And so neat things like that you can never, ever get again. And so that's some of the neat stuff that I've got. I mean, to have, the Masked Avenger, who was big here in Crockett era, the Mid-Atlantic area, which was Reggie Parks. I mean, to have, one of his original masks. I've got a chair. Some of the goofiest things that most people think, what was you thinking? I got a broken chair out of the Mid-South Coliseum and had Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee autograph it. And now that's what Mark James wants to trade me for doing my book, but I'm not going to do that. But just little things like that, Bruiser, have meant the world to me. I've got a receipt. I put it in the book that one night I came back from WCW and stopped at a Waffle House at 3 a.m. And Gordon Soley and Terry Taylor walked in. This is when Gordon was doing some announcing, and, buddy, I was in heaven. I mean, I had the biggest plate of scrambled eggs and Gordon Soley on the other side. It don't get no better than that, Jack. Yes, but we talked, and we got ready to leave, and Gordon said, let me get that ticket. And he bought our food, and I got the ticket. When he paid, I went up and got the ticket from the lady, and still got that to this day. So a lot of stuff that, most people think, George, you've been hitting the head too many times. But just little things like that, especially with, Gordon passing and the guys they're not here anymore. I never took any of that for granted. I just had Baby Doll, who I've known for years, and still use her a lot on my shows. I'd ask her for something, and anything. I've got several pictures of her, but she came up and gave me one of the boas, the big boas that she wore in Starrcade when she came out with Tully. So just got that recently. So just neat little stuff. One day I hope to open up my own museum, and of course I got all my wrestling magazines. I don't have nothing from my childhood, but I got every wrestling magazine and picture of Paul Jones that was ever given to me. So, but all that, Bruiser, and of course, if there was an underneath, Hall of Fame. I mean, I saw there's been a lot of great guys. I think of Bob Cook down in Florida, who was a tremendous, just unbelievable. And I was never shy about it. If I saw somebody do a good move, I stole it. Most guys said, man, you can't steal my stuff. And I don't even think now it's got so bad where you can't do, the finishing move of another guy. But, man, that never stopped me. But if I saw it, that's all I've ever done. Is just stole everybody else's stuff. And it worked. I'm still doing it with Wahoo's War Dance and Paul's Tackle. And so Bob Cook was good. Gene Ligon, of course, who lives here in Charlotte. He was always very good. Gary Roll, who was my partner for years. I probably learned more from him. Of course, he was NWA World Junior Champion. And, of course, him and Denny Brown, their matches from Kansas City was unbelievable. Mike Davis, who passed away, he worked here in Crockett for years, him and Tommy Lane. Mike Davis was unbelievable. So those guys like that, I learned so much from. They'd be first, second match, but, of course, back then that was so important. Bruiser, that first and second match set the whole tone for everything. So there's probably, there's a good group of guys that really, led the match. I always joke, my guys, nowadays the fans worry about win or loss, never won a match. I hear that a lot. You never won a match, and I always laugh because I tell them, when I go to the bank on Monday, my lady at the drive-thru don't never ask me, did I win? Yeah, she just says, is it checking or savings? That's all she ever says. So, but anyway, there's a good group of guys there, Bruiser, that just a lot of them that the fans have forgotten, but man, they could work. I'm telling you, and I was in awe of a lot of them. Most times there's a lot of the underneath guys that was just more important for the show than even some of the, the big main event guys.
Well, I want to thank you for calling in, Bruiser.
I appreciate y'all.
Yep.
Thank you.
We got a special caller here on the line. We got, I believe, New Jack's on the line.
Hey, what's going on, man?
How you doing, New Jack?
Hey, New Jack. How are you, buddy?
Hey, man, what's happening?
How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm chilling. I'm just relaxing. I'm straight. What's going on with y'all?
Oh, we're just doing it. I'm sitting here talking about my book I just put out, buddy.
Did you? What kind of book?
It's about wrestling, about 32 years in the business. Yep.
Okay, you didn't put me in there like maybe I might be the baby's daddy.
No, I sure didn't. I left that out, buddy.
Good. How you doing, man?
Well, I'm doing real good. I was able a couple of weeks ago, New Jack. Things are so crazy up there in New Jersey. You just came in for a minute, and I was able to say hey to you before you'd left.
Yeah.
That couple of weeks ago, that big thing they did in New Jersey. So I got to see you there for just a little bit, but
yeah,
just still traveling the roads, buddy.
Yeah. I'm not going at it as hard as I was, man. But I'm still, I pop my head up every now and then.
Yeah.
There's actually. I'm sorry. I was just going to say there's actually a nice story in the book about New Jack, and we just talked about it a couple minutes ago. Was a
nice story in what book about me?
in George South's book, Dad, You Don't Work, You Wrestle, and he talks about a little moment with you where you actually asked him if he was a preacher and if you would pray for him. Do you remember this?
That had to have been a long time ago.
Oh, it was. Well, we were both in Smoky Mountain wrestling together.
I know. Hey, if that's the case, then I know I asked you to pray for me then if I was running around in Smoky Mountain, Tennessee, in Virginia, and then West Virginia and Kentucky. Yeah, I did ask you to pray for me down there, bro, because I didn't know if I was gonna make it to the next show or not, because I had no white people down there mad at me. I was like, I'm like, we was just playing. This is like jokes.
Yeah,
like, God,
they took it a little too serious, didn't they?
Yeah. Because dude, I remember, and thanks for putting me in your book too, man.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and I mean, Mustafa, your partner, he's from. Of course, I'm down here in Charlotte, but he's from Kings Mountain, North Carolina, right outside of Charlotte.
Well, you know what? A lot of people don't know, dude, but I'm from Greensboro.
Are you really?
Yeah. I'm from my hometown is Greensboro. I moved to Atlanta when I was small, so I mean, when you go on Wikipedia and everything, be like, he's from Atlanta. No, I'm not from Atlanta, dude. I'm from Greensboro.
Oh my goodness, I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. If we cross paths in Smoky Mountain, I probably did ask you to pray for me then, brother. So,
yeah, we were together. We worked a lot on TVs and stuff, and it may have been Johnson City, Tennessee. I think that's what I put in there that night. You're right, buddy. Y'all had some heat there, man.
Yeah. Hey, that was some good times, man. And it was funny because people back then, they were really like into the as the fans will understand, the good guy, the bad guy thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when the black dude rose up in 1994 and a black paid for Trans Am with a Malcolm X license plate on the front, oh God. Yeah. So, and I had told Cornette, he said, well, I just need a black tag team. So I was like, okay. And at the time, I was like, by myself. And he said, what about, do you have anybody in mind you want to tag with? And I said, well, what about Mustafa? I said, yeah, Mustafa. So he said, I've always given Jim credit for this. He actually came up, me and him together came up with the name The Gangsters. All right. And he was running it back and forth. And he said, we were just like pulling out just pull it out, what different names might come up. So then Jim said, what about the Gangsters? And I said, close. I said, take off the ER-S and put on a A-H-A-S, something like that, the Gangsters. He like, I like it. And that's when the Gangsters was born. But see, what a lot of people didn't know was Cornette, all of my promos were just like, he just give me my point. And I mean, example, he just come out and say something to make white people mad. I said, do what? He said, say something to make white people mad. And I'm like, okay. And Mustafa looked at me like, oh, and I'm like, Mustafa looking at me like Scooby-Doo, like, oh. And I'm sitting there like, I'm like, okay, he came back, he said, say something about OJ. I was like, all right, gotcha. I'm like, okay, this will make white people mad, and I think it'll probably get me shot at the same time, but here you go. So I cut this promo, and I'm like, I want to give a special shout-out to my homeboy, OJ Simpson. Keep up the good work. Too less to worry about. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
They was out there like, what? Dude, the cops had to drive us, like, out of the little town, and I think it was, like, his own little personal, little squirts and giggles. He pulls up, and he's like, go down this mountain, and you go around for a little while. He didn't tell us it was going to be like 4 hours of going around in circles, round and round. And I was like, Jesus, God. And like every time we would come to town after that, man, because, I mean, they had aired all that stuff. Dude, it was crazy, man. And I mean, when we left, I wasn't really all that upset. I was like, I thought wrestling was supposed to be fun, like, but
yeah,
I went to jail too many times for that. I was like, hey, man, we could just play fighting, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
But I mean, it's just, hey, bro, it was what it was, and I had fun, in Smoky Mountain, and that whole area,
good day.
You know what I mean? Because I always tell people that, I learned a lot being around Ricky and Robert and Tracy Smothers mainly, because some guys, they're like, Jack, I mean, 'cause I didn't know diddly fart when I came in the door, man, so it was just like, they were like, Jack, we were, just, I'm like, hey, man, just take my hand and show me how to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what they did. I mean, I would listen, and I wasn't nothing but a pair of boots and a set of ears and eyes. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, I didn't call the spot. I didn't call nothing. I mean, dude, they would call my comeback. They would call my get heat. They're going to do your thing. You know what I mean? And it's like all I would do was sit there and listen, and then, then I would take over when it came to my promos. And see, that's what, like, a lot of these little greenhorns, these days, they think because they can do a 460 or a 980 or a 1200 flip, man, it's not. It's garbage, you know what I mean? It's like when you start out with the basics, 1, 2, 3, headlock, lock up, you know what I mean, arm drag, hip toss, you know what I'm saying? And that's, that's what your bases are. But I mean, I saw a kid one time came in the ring and told me he could wrestle. He said, Jack, watch this moonsault. And he did a moonsault perfect. I'm like, okay, let me see you lock up. And he didn't know how to do a headlock.
Yeah.
And I said, see, that's where wrestling has gone so far off track to like now everybody, they're trained first how to fly a jet plane, then they want to learn how to ride a bicycle. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And that's why it's like now I'm more of a helping hand with people than I am, trying to make a point. It's like, it's almost like, talking to some of these guys are like pointless because they know everything. So it's like, if I can work with them, I will. If I can't, I won't waste my time. And that's why you don't see me much out on the indie circuit no more, because it's just impossible to work with people, and I'm not in the ring with anybody because, over a period of 10 to 12, 15 years, times have changed. Diseases have gotten a little stronger, and I've got just a little concerned, you know what I mean? So it's like, I've shied away from all of that, and I mean, I'm just not doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, wrestling was wrestling back up until like the 80s, early 90s, and then now it's just garbage. So all the thing it is now is, to me, it's a paycheck. That's all. It's a paycheck and a bend over. If you saw this picture I put up yesterday, you know what I'm talking about. Brian Knobs sent me a picture, dude, of his butt.
Who did?
Brian Knobs texted me a picture, and I guess he was telling me to kiss his ass, right? And after I had knocked him out a couple of months ago down in Florida, because he was running his mouth, to me, and I just got up. I mean, in front of a whole locker room, he's talking crap to me like I'm green. I got up and I punched his face, and next thing, this was the last thing he remembered. And they wanted us to go on the radio together, but I was like, no, I'm going to the radio station. I'm like, y'all ain't going to hand me up like that. So, I mean, I kind of squashed all that, like, real quick. And then I saw him, George, at that same sign that you was at, and he was like, Jack, brother, we cool, we all right? Everything's fine? I was like, man, shut up, you know what I mean? So I went on and walked by, and they had hired all this security and stuff. I said, I don't need security. And they said, the security is not for you. They said it's for him. They said, so if you start to go at him, then they going to tackle you. They were like, yeah, we ain't worried about him. So I was just like, okay. So, when I walked by him, I was like, man, shut up. You a punk, shut up. So when we went out the door, I'm like, all right, cool. Now, I ain't anything from him. And, my number's easy to get if you're in the business. He got my number from somebody. And he texted, I guess apparently somebody else was with him. And they texted the picture, and he was standing in the bathroom with his pants pulled down to his ankle or to his knees and got his hands on both his butt cheeks with his butt spread it apart. And, dude, I swear to God, you could have put a grapefruit in his butthole. I'm not lying. I'm not. I put it, and I knew Facebook was going to do it. They closed my account for like 24 hours. They blocked me from doing anything except deleting people for 24 hours because I posted that picture, but I sent that picture to everybody that I could possibly think of, and he didn't know I was going to do it. So then I texted him back. I said, if you got any more pictures like that, please send them to me before Facebook closes me down. And he didn't think I was going to do it, but I did. And, dude, he has his butt cheeks spread over, and I swear to God, I have never seen a human being's butthole so big in my life. Somebody done tampered with that boy's toy box. I'm not playing, man. It's like I said, they took the picture down. I don't know. Only thing I can do now is just you send me your number since I know this is legit, and I'll text you the picture, and you will die because it was like, dude, if you saw it, you'd be like, oh my God, because I mean, it looked like honestly, it looked like somebody. His butthole looks like somebody's mouth is open. It was terrible. So I put it on Facebook. It was like, I said, you got anything else you want to send me? Go ahead. I ain't heard a word from him. So I guess he was like, oh, God, I hate him. I said, you should know by now, bro. You send me some ugly pictures of some nasty crap. I'll post that stuff in a minute. So it's like I said, if you didn't get it, if you want it, when we get done, just send me your number back on Facebook, and I'll send it to you just for your own personal little ha-ha. Because I mean, it was pathetic and funny all at the same time. And I posted it, and people were just like, oh my God, like throw up my mouth, like, oh, like, dude, it was so nasty. I was like, oh God, dude, it was terrible. It was terrible. So hey, it is what it is, man. Hey, welcome to the business.
Well, New Jack, we want to thank you for calling in and talking to George for a few minutes. You're definitely
no problem, man. And George, like I said again, thank you, brother, for putting me in your book.
Thank you.
And I'll send you my address where you can send me my money. and the money order will be fine. It'll be cool. Hey man, love you, man, and thanks for the time. We spent down in Smoky Mountains, and I'm sure you've been around a lot longer than me. So if you were there when I was there, I was older as I started at damn near 30 years old. So I mean, but I was a kid in the ring, and if we spent any time in the locker room and in the ring together, it was a pleasure and an honor, bro. Now, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, New Jack. Thank you, buddy.
All right, man.
And I'll see you down the road. Man. Thank you.
I'm sure. Y'all take it easy.
You too. Thanks, man. That was cool. Just like you were saying earlier, you always got to treat people how they treat you, and New Jack's always good with us, so we're always good with Jack. I don't know if that story was with your book story.
Yeah, that's not in the book.
That picture might be in the New Jack book, but it's not.
Yeah, that'd be New Jack's book. That's not mine.
One guy we talked about him earlier was Ole Anderson, and I've had some people tell us kind of the same thing. Was if you don't really get like his sense of humor, you might find him that he doesn't. He's a mean guy or something. Do you think that's true?
Well, I've always got along with him great. I mean, and you try to tell people that you got to let Ole be Ole. And, he lasted, 40-something years in the wrestling business and had a job. You've got to be doing something right. I heard, several of the guys, the old-timers say it, and it made so much sense that, Ole was paid to draw money. He wasn't paid to be nice. And, that meant something. I mean, he kept a job for over 40 years. He took care of a lot of guys. And he was always good to me. I mean, I from just watching him as a kid to getting to know him and getting in the ring with him, and even now being able to, just talk with him on the phone. And, the difference between me and the other people, even his temper sometimes, and he gets so mad at me when he still thinks I'm making $1 million off of my Anderson brother tag team tournament, and of course I don't tell him no different. I tell him he's putting my kids through school, and, and that, you just let him be Ole. I mean, and I put him over, and he's still, probably one of the greatest tag team wrestlers. I mean, I learned so much from those guys, and so I think if you just let Ole, I've never had a problem with him. Now, he's cussed me out. He's probably wanted to fire me and everything else, but I love him. I mean, he's probably one of the most popular guys at FanFest, every year. And
definitely.
If you just let, I've had people, like they're telling me something I don't know, that Ole's grouchy and he's stubborn and all that. I'm thinking, tell me something I don't know. But, we all heard about what was a couple of years ago at FanFest when David Flair was sitting there and he was selling some Four Horsemen pictures, and Ole got up, stuck that chest out and strutted over there and asked David why he's selling his pictures. Mm-hmm. And of course, David, being young in the business, was a little bit intimidated, and, Ole kind of, saw that, and Ole kind of had fun with that. And even to this day, I said, David, what you should have done is told Ole, you dang right, I'm selling your picture, and I'm making $1 million off of it. And, boy, Ole would have I simply strutted back over there and sat down if you'd have told him that. But when you don't let Ole be Ole, buddy, he's going to eat you alive, even now. And every time I see him, I hug him to death and say, thank you for making my car payment this month. With my Anderson T-shirts and all that, and it just, and I love that part of it. See, that's the thing that's missing, the different personalities, the way wrestling used to be. You had a little bit for something, for everybody. Mm-hmm. New Jack said something a while ago that was so neat, and even Ole touched on in his book, is, they asked Ole many times, was Tommy Rich in his prime that good? And Ole just simply said that Tommy would listen. And see, New Jack just said the same thing. Even when he got in there with rock and roll and Tracy and we worked on TV or something, New Jack would listen. Mm-hmm. And see, that's the greatest thing in the world. If you got somebody that can listen, man, you can draw some money. That's the problem now. Everybody, both guys are too busy talking over their match that nobody's listening. Mm-hmm. See? And that's the part that's missing. But I love Ole. I tell you, I was so excited. He's done several of my Anderson brothers, and he just means a lot to me. And as some of those guys start passing away, we start realizing how much they meant to wrestling. All of our childhood. I got to see Mil Mascaras a couple weeks ago also, and I'm still in awe of him. I mean, it's just amazing, and he still looks good, still presents himself, the mask, and just little things like that that I tried to capture in my book is just what those guys still mean when you see them.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's possible to learn from other wrestlers and learn different styles today, the way the wrestling is, and like if you just came right out of developmental, do you not learn a lot of the things that you would have learned if you would have been on the territories or even small independents?
Well, see, the hardest thing, and even WCW, everybody's forgot about the power plant that was in Atlanta. This was one of the first, as y'all know, state-of-the-art training facilities. I mean, it had 4 beautiful rings, air conditioning, and huge nitro banners hanging. It's the most beautiful place you'd ever seen, but it went out of business. And I think the biggest reason is, you can only train so much in the same building. And you've got to, being out on the road and going into different towns and different settings and different, just different atmospheres, that's where you learn to work. And, what was so amazing is back in the day, most of the fans traveled too. And you couldn't, if I worked Ricky Steamboat every night, you couldn't do the same match every night like these guys do now. Mm-hmm. Because you had the same fans traveling, traveling to the different shows. So you may have been out there with the same guy, but you had to change that whole matchup. And that part is missing. You can't learn it in a nice building. Some of the greatest shows I've ever been to have honestly been in old flea market buildings, even the old ECW arena, and just that mystique about it. And those guys, these old hot buildings. And, I get tickled now at some of the shows we run where the fans don't ask who's on the card. First thing they ask is, do you have air conditioning? They don't care what the main event is as long as you got some air conditioning. And, and I get tickled. I said, what in the world has happened to pro wrestling? But, I don't know if you can learn. I mean, and I love the different styles. I mean, that's what's so neat. Tully Blanchard used to tell me that, all he ever done his whole career was he took something from each guy and just did it the way Tully Blanchard would do it. Mm-hmm. And I just always kind of love that. I remember, Bobby Eaton, who I even put it in the book that I agree with, Steve Kern, that Bobby's probably the greatest ever. I don't think he got, any of the credit that he deserved. I mean, as far as doing anything. And he told me one night, he says, I asked him, I said, Bobby, is there anything you can't do? I mean, here's a guy that would come off that Alabama Jam, you'll never see anything like that again. And I took that so many times, I was going to name my first kid that. but Bobby, he said, I couldn't leapfrog. I said, what do you mean? He said, I just never liked to leapfrog, where a guy runs at you off the ropes and you just kind of leapfrog him. And come think of it, I don't think you could ever see Bobby Eaton on any of his videos, Best of or Memphis or anywhere, him leapfrogging. And I just always thought that was so neat that Bobby was honest about that. I mean, here's a guy that could do anything. He'd forgot more than most guys could come up with. And he just said there's a million things I could do, but there was one thing that I just never felt comfortable doing. And I just thought that was kind of neat that even Bobby Eaton, there's some things. That's what's wrong now. Guys are trying stuff that they don't even feel comfortable with. Mm-hmm. Y'all know as well as I do. You see 8 guys go to the top rope and they're trying this suplex, and everybody up there is scared to death. Mm-hmm. You can tell it. And they're trying to properly put some guy around his head around your neck, so when he powerbomb him, you're going to kill the guy anyway. And you can see it and feel it. So they're trying a lot of stuff that they don't even feel comfortable with, at all, much less. It's like New Jack said a while ago. Guys can't even do a headlock. I even go one step before that at my training camp. Is the first day I'll give the guys a broom, just an old-fashioned straw broom that Grandma had at her house. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, sweep this ring. I'll be back in a minute. 9 times out of 10, when I come back, that broom's laying in the ring, and the guy's gone out the back door. He's wanting a contract, but he's not going to sweep your ring out. And so you can pretty much see right then that this guy probably wasn't going to make it. So,
yeah. Andrew, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. Going back to New Jack a little bit, have you ever wrestled New Jack?
Yeah, several times. We were, of course, it was back in Smoky Mountain, probably 12, 15 times, him and Mustafa on TV, the TV tapings. I actually I put it in the book. I got to be, they did a little angle where they had hurt Robert Gibson and Ricky needed a partner. So he came in the dressing room and got me. And we laughed about it to this day because all I had is one bandana. I put one bandana on my leg and went to the ring with rock and roll against the gangsters. And of course, I was time of my life just coming to the ring with that music. And they'd done a little angle where I even put in the book, I got Ricky in so much trouble that his wife had to come to the ring and save us. That was the finish. So, I worked with him a bunch of times in Smoky Mountain.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he's underrated as just a performer?
Oh, yeah. And he hit a lot of it nail on the head a while ago. I mean, the Smoky Mountain stuff I loved because it was what New Jack said. It was good guy against bad guy. Mm-hmm. And, New Jack did some, kind of, crazy interviews and stuff, but they used to come to the ring before rock and roll ever got to the ring, and all New Jack would do, he'd just hold his hands up in the air and do that, that Malcolm X sign. He'd just make an X with his arms. That'd be it. And that play, wouldn't say a word. and that place would go crazy. And see, to have a good bad guy, you got to have a good guy. And see, when that rock and roll music, I mean, it was just good. It was good money for everybody, good business.
Yeah.
And I really think he is. I mean, and if you take away the gangster stuff, New Jack can still go out there and have a match. But he's kind of how I feel too. I mean, I know stuff. It's amazing at my training school on Tuesdays over in Charlotte is I'll get my guys to do stuff that I hadn't thought about in 20 years. It just comes back to me, stuff that me and Denny Brown used to do every night. But if you don't work, New Jack hit it on the head, if you don't work with somebody every night that can work, it hurts you. You start going backwards. And that's why a lot of times I don't even leave my house. I got to work on that big convention up there in New Jersey. A couple weeks ago, they came and asked me. It's kind of funny. They wanted to put me in an 8-man. Said they needed a guy. Jack, I said, won't you just take a guy out and make it a 6-man? But anyway, I first thing I asked him, what about money? What about anything? I said, listen, I mean, I'm not no prima donna, but I want to know who I'm working with. I said, because it ain't worth my time to get out there and, some guy want to put me through 6 flaming tables.
Yeah.
I said, I'll just go back to my table and eat pizza. But it worked out good. Had Coco Beware and all those guys in it. And, you just had to calm them down. I mean, that's the most amazing thing. Our business, our sport, is the only sport where slower is better. I was told that, man, 30 years ago. Football, they tell you to run fast. Basketball, baseball, you got to speed. But our business, slower is so much better. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, when I finally realized that, oh my goodness, it made it to, you can see that now. I'm telling you right now, buddy, I can't sit still. It's like these matches that's going on now, especially TV, and I know they got so much time they've got to please everybody, but man, it's like your fast forward button stuck. I put it in my book. First time I ever body slammed Dick Murdoch, I ran over to pick him up, and he punched me right in the head. He about knocked me out. He said, get away from me. And he wanted to sell that body slam. And Dick Murdoch, if you body slammed him, he'd go out in the crowd holding his back. He'd fall over the chairs. He'd slobber. He'd spit. About 20 minutes later, he'd come back to you. And he really, man, you thought, man, that was the most awesome body slam I ever seen.
Yeah.
The way it is now, up New Jersey, I saw these guys do superplex, 3 guys at the same time off the top rope. Every one of them jumped back to their feet. I'm thinking somebody's got to be dead here or something. But that's the part that's missing. They think the more moves I get in this 10 minutes, the better it is, but it's not that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can teach it. I try. I yell a lot when I see guys do it, and I still occasionally see, and I'm not one to be in such a hurry to leave some of these shows that I don't go. If I see a good little match, I love to go tell them. Funny thing now is if you go back there in the back and try to tell them, probably shouldn't have done it that way. They all get very defensive. I love what everybody tells me. They say, well, that's the way y'all did it. That's the way y'all did it back in the day. Like it don't work now. But it worked then and it works now, yeah.
I get a call on the line. Unseen Entity.
Hey, Jack. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, what's up?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
I've been chomping at the bit to ask somebody this that knows something about it for years. I'm not exactly even sure what year it is, but when I bring it up, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. The Bill and Randy Mulkey match.
Yep.
Whose idea was that? And did it do your heart good to be when boys just about only win?
Well, first thing is I'll tell everybody, and I've told the guys there at In Your Head many times, that it was me and Gary Roll that was the Gladiators. I get very upset. I mean, I take this stuff serious. There's even people on YouTube saying that they were the Gladiators. I don't know who in their right mind would claim to be a gladiator, but, that was me and Gary. And that was Dusty. Dusty was a genius. And there was, everybody knows that famous match on TV where the Gladiators were defeated by the Mulkeys, but what a lot of people don't know is the next week they sold out with the Midnight Express. They sold out 3 huge Coliseums around Charlotte with them in the main event. They went to their hometown, the Mulkeys' hometown in Anderson, South Carolina, and sold out this like Civic Center with just Midnight and the Mulkeys. So and I still see those guys to this day. The Mulkeys, they're still back. They're back here in Charlotte, and it was just Dusty. It was a neat thing. Dusty, he knew what he wanted to do, and it worked. When we went to the Crockett Cup the following weekend too, in Baltimore, the Mulkeys were the hottest thing in the world. I remember Jim Crockett was very upset that they didn't have no Mulkey merchandise. If they had, they'd have made millions. I mean, everybody got. It was a 2-day tournament in Baltimore, and the Mulkeys were they were in the tournament, but they were the hottest thing in the world after they beat me and Gary. What's so funny about it is me and Gary were West Coast tag champs, the Gladiators, and I hadn't seen those belts yet, Jack. Man, I don't know who's got them. But I love it because, Gary always took stuff real serious, and I remember that morning when they told us that Dusty, I still laugh about it with Gary, they told us Dusty wanted to see us, and nobody had really an idea what was going on, and I remember me and Gary, before we walked in that meeting, Gary told me, he said, George, this might be it. He said, this may be the big contract we've been waiting on. And I said, just wait and see. 5 minutes later, we walk in, and we're told we're going to lose to the Mulkeys. So I don't think that's the contract that we were waiting on. But it's amazing now. People still, I've had guys even come up to me and say, my claim to fame was I was one of the Gladiators. And I kind of laugh, and I tell them I got the suit hanging up here in my garage. I don't know which Gladiator you was. But yeah, it was an amazing thing. I loved it. I mean, people say, man, you never even won a match. And that was during that time period when me and Gary had 4 or 5 different gimmicks going at the same time. I mean, we were making a lot of money. We were working our tails off 3 or 4 times on TV, and many times we'd change outfits and go back out. But I've got that, and also the Mexican Twin Devils, which a lot of people don't remember those guys, but me and Gary actually wore that outfit too. They were in a couple tournaments, so we did good with those. The famous Cruel Connection too. I just had a guy email me yesterday, said he had seen something on YouTube about the Cruel Connection, and he asked, was it me? And I had no idea what he was talking about. Of course, I watched the video, and it definitely wasn't us. But, buddy, they got the nicest looking lime green outfits you ever seen, let me tell you.
Now, did you, now if you'd be on the same show working as yourself, then under a mask, would you, go out of your way to try to do different moves and work a different style? Yeah,
and that helped me. I mean, I don't have nothing but great things to say about that whole time. Is and honestly, the biggest reason Dusty ordered all those different outfits from me and Gary is there was a lot of guys here in Charlotte, but a lot of them couldn't work a lick. They couldn't go out there and put nobody over, much get themselves over, much less put any guys over on TV. And so Dusty came up with this idea and said, man, we got George and Gary. And, he used to call us his utility guys. And we ordered all these outfits. And I used to do good about trying to work, different styles and stuff like that when I put on a different outfit till but there'd be some TVs where it'd be hot in these these high school gyms. And, after about the 3rd guy, when Ronnie Garvin gets a hold of you, you don't care if people know that you're the Gladiator or not, and you're just wanting Ronnie Garvin to tear the mask off, and there was times after about that 4th tape, I'd go out there with one Gladiator boot on and one Cruel Connection boot, and people never even noticed. But I love that part because you had to be there. I mean, you had to go out there, and they never told me to do things different. But I took that upon myself, and I thought, man, I'm going to have fun with this. Mm-hmm. And still got a lot of neat outfits out of it. Let me tell you, may not have learned to work any better, but I got a lot of neat outfits out of it.
South, I'm over here in Rockingham. I ain't even an hour away from you. And, man, I've been here in North Carolina all my life. And I just want to say please and thank you because it wasn't nothing for us to go to wrestling shows 4 nights a week.
That's right.
And
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Back in them days, you went to Greensboro. Next night, you was in Asheville. Next night, you was in, here or there, everywhere. And it was good to grow up in North Carolina, boss man. And
I appreciate that.
Please and thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Jack, answer. I'm going to get off here, fellas, and get back in the chat room, and I'll catch y'all later.
All right.
You're easy now.
Thanks for calling in, man.
Yep. Y'all be good.
One of the guys you talk about in your book is Al Perez, and I always thought he was Really underrated guy. He's like one of the smoothest guys in the ring. And I also like that he talked about his move there, the helicopter. I was just wondering if what moves were like really hard for you to take.
Well, that was once you took the first time of getting put up for that helicopter, you just you think Alvarez, who was a strong guy and still looks great. We saw him at FanFest a couple years ago, and that was so neat. And matter of fact, one of those pictures of him recently was put in the book, and that helicopter, first thing you're thinking is, this guy can't get me up. I mean, just in that position. And because, Scott Hall wasn't even doing like the what was it, the Razor Edge or anything like that at that time. So nobody had ever seen anything like this. And, buddy, he'd get you up in that. Next thing you know, you're looking at the lights, buddy. And, he would spin you. See, if he was in a good mood, he'd spin you a long time. And you didn't think he was ever going to land. And I've spun out of the ring several times. I mean, when you hit, you keep spinning. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? But he never, I don't think, was, he's another one like Bobby Eaton that never really got the credit. I mean, I loved his work. I always thought he looked good. I always joked with him and even put it in the book. I thought he should be like in a beach movie. He just had that great look and just was in great shape. And he really took care of the guys. Now, that was just a move that I never got used to that. Now, that he took good care of you. But now, when Big Sid Vicious grabs you in a power bomb, you just better say your prayers. That's all I'm saying. Make sure your bills are paid. And then, they tagged him with Dan Spivey, who Dan was real great. But they did this finish where they did a double power bomb. And them two, if you think I'm unorganized, them two's the most two unorganized guys in the world. So when one of them's throwing you down, the other one's trying to lift you up by your hair. So there was no good to come out of that. But after a few Steiner lines and, of course, Ultimate Warrior knocking me out, and telling me that I hurt his forearm with my head, I don't apologize for that. But you get smart, and then I started learning to take guys' moves. And, I used to take Sid Vicious's big boot, and I'd take a bump. Well, I think I've shared this with y'all before. I'd go flying out on the floor, and I'd sell it and really make it look great. But the truth to be known now is I knew the longer I stayed out on the floor, the less I had to get in the ring with Big Sid. So every TV match, you'd say, hey, George, that bump you take where I give you the big boot and you go flying out of the ring, can you take that? And I said, yeah, I think I can. I'd lay on that floor at about the 20 count. But nah, Sid was great. But it's just some of those moves. It was just, having Abdullah the Butcher. There's my good buddy Dick Bourne of the Gateway. He found a picture of me laying there in the ring, and Abdullah, I swear, he's probably 100 feet up in the air coming down with that big elbow. And I can't believe I lived through it. And I had my buddy Dick put under it, you think you're having a bad day, when you see that big Abdullah come down. So those moves like that, you just grin, just close your eyes and hope, hope for the best. And then you get in there, of course, with, flair and just, the figure four. So I always loved it when I took Lou Thesz's Thez press, or, I wrote in my book about the original Sheik stabbing me with his pencil. Now, to me, that was like code of honor, just for me to read about these guys in a book and then to finally get to take their finishing move, even now, to be punched by Ronnie Garvin. The one thing I try to do with a lot of classes, I knew what these guys' finishing moves was, and whatever it was, I was going to make it look. It was an art form to me. It was how I made a living, and I'm used to know. I've seen Ronnie Garvin punch people with his finish, and it took him 4 days to fall, and it looked awful. And I just always took a lot of pride in making his punch, just look like it was the most devastating thing in the world, and did real good with it, And I remember I'd been knocked out. Steiners were rough with their Steiner lines, and I remember I went to WWTV one week, and that's right when the Steiners went up there for the first time. I think it was in a ring with a couple of the top guys, and they throwed the easiest Steiner line I'd ever seen. So when they came out of the dressing room, I said, so let me get this right. When we're down in Atlanta, you kill me with it, but we come way up north, and, you barely touch the guys with it. So a lot of those moves, you just, oh, my goodness. And it was always neat. Sean and Marty were good. They never hurt me at all. They were unbelievable, but it was always fascinating with them because they always loved to come up with new stuff. and they'd have a different finish every week.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had to be, and of course Brian Pillman, who I love tremendously, he was just, I always thought, way before his time. He loved to come up with unique stuff. And, that's why when they brought Thunder Liger over here to work Brian Pillman was doing Thunder Liger stuff here before Thunder Liger got here.
Uh-huh.
You just had to catch up with him.
Mm-hmm.
So those neat little finishes like that. But I'm not going to lie, when, Black Bart came in and said, I'm going to do the trash compactor, you kind of welcomed that, because that was just a simple leg drop,
Uh-huh.
So it was neat sometimes just take just a simple little finish. But yeah, the helicopter was probably the most unique. Nobody's tried it since. But many times I just knew I was going to end up in the popcorn stand.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say this about the between like the Steiner line and Ultimate Warrior clothesline. Like the Steiner line to me just looked totally awesome. Like when I was a kid, I would really pop for that. That was huge. But Ultimate Warrior to me, like I always thought, man, this just looks terrible. And then later on, I found out like so many guys said he was really stiff, and I just thought, well, that's kind of like the worst of both worlds. Like he would really be hurting guys, and at the same time, really not looking very good. Yeah,
and see, you can actually, and that's what people don't understand. You can be snug. Even now, when we got, the fans up close to the ring or something, there's nothing wrong with getting in there and being snug with the guy. And, but there's also a thing of being careless, and I've been, the Warrior, he was just so big and so, just so full, like locomotive forward, buddy. And if you got in his way, he just ran over you. And, you just, I throwed my hands up. I smartened up after getting knocked out a few times, and I just started throwing my hands up. Mm-hmm. And, he'd still cut me a flip. Brady Boone, who a lot of the fans may remember, years ago, he's passed away too, but I loved him. He was a real good gymnast when he first came to Charlotte. Of course, he went to Portland and all that, but he took one of the first bumps of taking a clothesline. Nikita clotheslined him one time, and he turned a complete backflip. Mm-hmm. And nobody had ever seen anything like that. And it wasn't Nikita being stiff, it was Brady Boone being able to do that. Yeah. There's a big difference. And it was like when that happened, and Crockett even used it as an opening on a TV show. So everybody saw it. When he went to Portland, they even used that clip on Portland TV. It was just the most awesome move that you ever seen. But it also was not good because you had a lot of these big guys, all of a sudden saying, man, I'm going to hit this guy harder now to make him do that. Mm-hmm. And I've always said, I can take a better bump if you let me than if you force me. And see, that's what's wrong now. A lot of these guys, I have to trust you first of all. I joke, and I even put in the book that, used to be when I finished a match, I thanked you, Jack. Now, when these guys finish a match, they say, are you okay? Do I need to call the ambulance? And it's just different. Are you dead? And it's just different. Mm-hmm. And Flair, if you go back, Flair probably had one of the most devastating chops in the world, but he never hit nobody in the face. The chops never, I see guys now trying to chop a guy and they hit him in the mouth and the nose and busting their lips. And so even though, Flair would chop you to make your chest bleed, but he still took care of you. And I know that sounds crazy, but he never hit you in the mouth. Mm-hmm. I've had guys go to clothesline knee and their knee swing around and hit you right between the legs, and drop you to your knees. And, the clothesline didn't hurt, but buddy, you about killed me with your knee. Mm-hmm. So that part of it, and I don't think is taught, probably not as much. You really have to take care of that guy you're in the ring with. Mm-hmm. And, that's the thing. And it's just different. It's just like one of our kids just went down, this guy was training, he just went down to Florida. And he, for a week, Steve Regal and all these guys loved him. He worked with Steamboat, for Steamboat, and they got to watch him. And he called me one night late and said that he had messed up in the ring and he had busted a guy's lip. And he really felt bad about it. And I understood that part, but, I think what we've done is we've heard the word fake so much that we forget that this still is a tough business. And stuff like that happen. You never intend to hurt anybody, but it happens. Mm-hmm. And, you just try not, you just try to be careful, and that's why I tell these guys I train, it's hard enough, Jack, doing it the right way. much less getting in there doing it the wrong, doing it the wrong way.
Right.
And that's what I try to teach. You can't just throw George South any way you want to, because he's got to hit.
Yeah.
And that part of it I try to really instill in them. But, yeah, some of the guys like Warrior and them, buddy, they wasn't no tomorrow. When they clotheslined you, man. And so I just smartened up and said, man, I'm going to block it.
Yeah.
I'll probably get heat for blocking it, but, man.
Kind of along those lines.
Then you get another guy with Bullet Bob Armstrong or the Honky Tonk Man who you actually got to look out the corner of the eye and see if they're kicking you. I mean, they'll say, George, first time I worked Bullet Bob Armstrong, he was kicking me for 20 minutes before I even knew he was kicking me. I didn't feel it, and I put in a book, Honky Tonk Man told me the first time I worked him, he said, this is the easiest money you ever going to make. And, brother, it was. I'd worked Dustin Rhodes. Honky Tonk Man came into WCW for a short time, and we were talking in the dressing room one night, and I just worked Dustin Rhodes when he first started the night before. Dustin came in the dressing room the next day to thank me. And he said, man, George, he said, that was the easiest match I ever had last night. And Honky Tonk Man stood right up and high-fived me. It's like the Honky Tonk Man code of honor, buddy, And I said, that's how it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
when we had Bill Dundee on, and I asked him about there's a lot of guys that still can wrestle when they're older, and he said that it's because they learned how to work, and so they're not going to. Obviously still tough and everything, but they're not going to get as many injuries because they know what they're doing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I thoroughly agree. Once you get that foundation, nobody can take it from you. And it means so much more to me now than when I first started. And the simple stuff. And once you learn to work, you may never make a dime. I tell my guys all the time, you can be living under a bridge, but you can probably go out and have a 30-minute match anytime you want. If you get that foundation, nobody can take it from you. And see, that's what happened. And he even says it to this day. One of the perfect illustrations was, Johnny B. Bad, who I love tremendously. When he came into WCW, he was just learning, and they gave him this Johnny B. Bad gimmick, who he looked like $1 million. But he even says now that, once the confetti was shot and the bell rung, I was in trouble. and that's true. And you just, but when that bell rings, it's just you and that guy. So, but you can't blame Johnny B. Bad for taking the contract. I'd have done the same thing, but that's why I instill in these guys I train, and, you get that foundation, nobody can take that from you. And it's amazing. I mean, you look at Jerry Lawler and guys like that. I just worked with Jerry Lawler. He's unbelievable. I mean, I'm just telling you, he's taking backdrops. It's unbelievable. And he's still over like $1 million. And, that's the amazing thing even about WWE. Some of their road agents and stuff should still be in the ring. All through my book, I write about when people like, Terry Taylor and Les Thatcher. I know the injuries, and age, of course, comes in play. But, guys like that, when there's not a place in wrestling for them, I think of Dick Slater. I know his back gives him trouble. But, guys like that, they could still go out there. I think now. I could be just an old crazy wrestler like the rest of them. But, those guys like that, they should still be a place for them,
Every time Lawler wrestles on TV, it's always like really entertaining, and the crowd's reacting, and I always think it's one of the better matches.
The most amazing thing I saw Lawler, this was probably 6 months ago. He was working with a guy on TV, and the guy grabbed his wrong arm, and probably nobody in the whole wide world saw this but me. But Lawler just simply just switched arms and put his left arm in that guy. I think the guy had him in an arm bar. This is nationwide television. Mm-hmm. And so Lawler was teaching this kid without saying a word. And probably, like I said, nobody probably didn't even realize it. But the guy was just excited, and he grabbed Lawler in the, on the right arm in an arm bar, and Lawler just switched arms real quick. Now, to me, I went crazy because that's just neat to see Lawler still teaching, guys. And, but yeah, we just unbelievable. Just, he taking backdrops and, one of my students, Jake Manning, has been working him a lot on some of these shows. That Man Scout, Jake Manning, and
we're a big fan of the Man Scout here. Yeah.
Oh, he's something. The first night they worked, Lawler's wanting a drop kick. Well, Jake keeps running into the ropes to come off wanted a backdrop. Well, Jake keeps hitting the rope coming off to take a backdrop. But no, Lawler wanted to take one, So Jake, when I finally got it right, he took the greatest backdrop in the world. But, that's how I would have thought, Yeah, I'll be glad to take a backdrop. But Lawler's still working hard.
Mm-hmm. I love the Man Scout gimmick, too. I think that's a lot of fun.
Well, see, I love it, and of course, everybody knows this thing we're doing with the freight train on the $5 wrestling. And I tell you, up in New Jersey, I mean, I had my, of course, I had my book for sale, and I was sitting with Freight Train right there at the table, and he's over like $1 million. It's just a neat little story, He's grown up here in Charlotte and loves the business, and I always get tickled when people, they'll email us and say, "Well, how did y'all get him to act so nice?" And I'm saying that's him. He's not acting. I mean, he's just a good old boy, and it's just neat, to see this thing take off with him. He was up in New Jersey. You got Mil Mascaris, Great Muda, Van Vader, and everybody's wanting to meet Freight Train.
Yeah.
Like, something wrong with this, buddy. But I love it. Just a great guy.
Mm-hmm. That really took off all over the internet. So, that's where I started hearing about it. Then I was like kind of hooked. I was like looking up all the different Freight Train videos, and I see a lot of wrestlers even like sharing the videos on Facebook.
Oh, I love it, and I mean I always try to, when they're doing one close by, I try to go get on it because I know everybody, just to keep my face out there. Mm-hmm. Let me sit in the audience and eat popcorn or something. Say here's a special guest, because those videos are the hottest thing in the world right now, and it's just fun, And what's so amazing is about it, we've had, when we first started doing them, we had guys that were on there getting mad because we had one guy, this big old boy, he's about 500 pounds. He wrestled some of these little independent outlaw shows, but he had bought a Bill Eadie mask from me, if you can imagine this. It just barely fit his head, and he went and sat ringside. Well, to me, it was the greatest thing in the world. Here's a 500-pound guy with a Bill Eadie mask, mask superstar. And so we videotaped it and put it on one of the $5 wrestling. This guy got so mad because I think he thought we edited it, or something. But when I finally got up to him, met him, he said, "Man, y'all shouldn't have put a video, a clip of me on there sitting at ringside." And I said, "Well, buddy, you was sitting ringside with a Bill Eadie hood on." We didn't edit it; it was you. So that's what I think's funny about some of these matches. We just, Jake and them, they just record. That's all they do. I mean, if you see a match that you think is so bad that it's good, it was just recorded. Nobody edited it. The one kid, Dynamite, that came to the ring and he forgot to take his Bluetooth out of his ear. So he's like locking up and doing spots with a Bluetooth attached to his ear. It was the greatest thing I ever seen. And he said, "Man, y'all should have not put that on there." And I told him, I said, "Bro, you did go to the ring with a Bluetooth in your ear, So I just think that's neat. But it's, to see Freight Train happy, he's got a belt, and it's just neat, and he got to meet a lot of the fans, up there in New Jersey. And the thing, that's what I love about wrestling. Wrestling's gave this kid who would probably never had got out of Charlotte. Who knows, but it gave him a chance to travel. And I'll tell you the funniest thing, that night, I even put it up on Facebook. We're traveling to New Jersey, 3 a.m. in the morning. We pull off on this dirt road to get gas. I mean, we were on E. Little old bitty rinky-dink gas station out in the middle of nowhere. As soon as Freight Train gets out of that car, he gets recognized. That's a true story. This guy comes across the parking lot saying, "You're Freight Train." And I'll never dispute $5 wrestling again. The guy walked right by me to get the Freight Train. I'm trying to sell the guy a book at the gas pump, but he walked right by me. So I knew, man, yep, that $5 wrestling's taking off. So it's just neat to see little things. Honestly, we talked about the Mulkeys earlier. It's just kind of a different version of the Mulkeys.
Yeah.
The Mulkey took off because everybody wanted to see this, this underdog team win. And I'm telling you can only sit back and watch so many shoot tape, guys. Come on. I mean, buddy, that's the thing. I did one years ago, and everybody wants me to do another one. But I'm telling you, I said, just buy my book. I tell you.
There are a lot of people that have multiple shoot videos out there, and it's kind of the same stories over. And
oh yeah, and it's kind of neat when they all first came out.
Yeah, it was like
some of them, yeah, and some of them in the beginning were like 4 and 5 hours. I know I love to run my mouth too, but mine is a classic because the only reason I did one, the guy was going to buy me the biggest spaghetti dinner that you've ever had. And that was part of the deal. I didn't know what to charge the guy. I said, hey, you buy me dinner. But what's funny, through the whole shoot tape, I think you can still get it somewhere, but High Spots may even have it. But anyway, I'm sitting there trying to eat this dinner, and this goofy guy keeps asking me questions, you know. So I'm getting hot, you know. But that was all during that interview, man. I got this big, you know, fork of spaghetti, and I never get it to my mouth. Never. Because he asked me another question. So, man, next time I'm going to eat first, and then we'll do the shoot tape.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. Everybody's got them now. I mean, there's like 4 or 5, and it is a lot of the same stuff.
Mm. Now, speaking of spaghetti, we have to bring up the Italian Stallion. And,
yeah.
He's mentioned in your book, of course. And was it you know, were you happy that you can finally get out your whole side of the story with the Hardy Boys?
Yeah, I sure was. And, you know, I've got a picture up on my website now of Matt. You know, me and Matt still got, you know, even you read about my story, and I never disliked the Hardys. People created all this stuff, and, you know, I never had a problem with the Hardys. I even put in my book that, you know, I'm kind of neat. It's kind of neat. You know, I tell my kids all the time, they don't want to listen, but, you know, that I had a little hand in, you know, getting Matt and Jeff. Now, they worked their tails off. I put that all in the book. But, you know, for years, I never got to say my side of it, you know, and you know, and it comes down to people going to believe what they want. I love the Hardy. Listen, Matt Hardy is the hottest thing in the world right now on these independent shows. Mm-hmm. And I was just with him in Bluefield, West Virginia. This place was sold out, waiting on Matt Hardy to come to the ring. So, you know, I'm not stupid enough to bite the hand that feeds me. And I mean, he is putting, you know, food on my kids' table right now. And that's why, you know, they worked hard. Once we, you know, it's like J.J. Dillon says about me all the time. You know, you were given an opportunity, but you still have to do something with that opportunity. And that's the same thing with Matt and Jeff. We introduced a lot. What a lot of people don't know, and I didn't even put this in the book, my kids say that I'm going to write another book, Jack, and it's going to be called Dad, You Still Don't Work. That's going to be part 2. But, you know, what a lot of people don't know is we introduced a lot of guys to Vince McMahon. Honestly, it wasn't just the ones we introduced that got a job. We were always trying to get guys jobs. And a lot of them were jerks. A lot of them just didn't, you know, they had an opportunity and didn't do nothing with it and just fell by the wayside. So when Matt and Jeff were given this opportunity, they took off with it. And, you know, and I love how, you know, speaking of Jake Manning, I kind of ended that whole Hardy thing is, you know, whether they think we took advantage of them or whatever, but Jake says, you know, after seeing the success that the Hardy Boys have had, Jake says, please take advantage of me, George, you know. It was like after that Bluefield show, some guy posted on Facebook, said, man, how far is Matt Hardy's career fallen that he's in Bluefield, West Virginia? And I got so mad, I got on there and I said, listen, I watched him count $20 bills for over 3 hours. Please let my career fall that fast. Buddy, that's all I'm saying. You know, and, man, it's just amazing what people think. But I love Jeff and Matt. I just wish them the best. And right now, Matt, any show he's on, I'd love to be part of it because, you know, and I make sure, hey, I ain't stupid. I make sure I put my gimmick table up right beside his, too. So, and that's one thing I wanted to do with the book. You know, the first line about the Hardys is I got to be careful what I say because he's still my youngest son's favorite wrestler. You know, and I may need a picture eventually. And that's kind of what I want to do with the book. Even, you know, there's stuff that people have said about the Italian Stallion for years, and I even put in there, you know, the first page. I said that, you know, for years everybody thought Stallion was the mean one and I was the nice one, but I think it was the other way around. You know, I was the mean one. And I just, you know, cleared a lot of stuff up with Stallion because I've seen Stallion do a lot of good for a lot of people. You know, this day I still have people say stuff about him, and I say, well, have you ever met him? And they say, well, no. You know, they'll at least meet the guy. You know, it's like Raging Bull. I've heard so many stuff over Manny for years. But Manny has always made money for me. Mm-hmm. And I know him, you know, we're good friends. And I'm not saying we ain't butted heads over the years, but it goes back to what I said earlier, is you just kind of go by how the way the guys treat you. Yeah. And you know, and I kind of sum up the whole book is it just I'm very thankful for being able to be part of something that, you know, a lot of guys may have done a TV here and there, and they say that there was a wrestler. You know, now the thing in wrestling now is you ask the guy, you know, they'll tell you, I've been in the business 15, 20 years when they're lying. When you really need to ask them how many matches they've had. And then when they answer that, it kind of smartens you up a little bit. But I had a guy come in a couple weeks ago to my school, and he said, man, I just got in from world class. I said, brother, world class has been shut down 20 years. You know, of course, he got his bag and walked right back out the door. I guess he thought I was going to say, man, how's the Von Erichs doing, buddy? You know? He sure did. I thought, man, bro, you got a lot better than that now.
There was something in your book that actually McFoley talked about in his book, only he had Harley Race, and you have about Bob Roop trying to do hard way on Stallion. Was that something that people did a lot back in the day? Was you'd do like a hard way cut on somebody?
Yeah, well, it wasn't nearly as bad till Eddie Mansfield come out on TV, you know, and that whole 2020 mess came out saying, you know, this is how we did this and did that, and it was way before the magician thing where wrestlers do their tricks and all this kind of stuff. That show that was on that special that came on, and so it really wasn't as bad. Now I've seen guys do it. I've been hit hard way many times, and you know, it's the old timers could do it. Now you still felt it, and it like what it sounded. It was just hard way, and just opened you up. But the thing with Stallion and Bob Roop was done, of course, when, you know, they just really wanted to show the fans that, you know, Eddie Mansfield's nuts, and we're going to show you. And poor Bob Roop, he beat on Stallion's forehead for like 40 minutes trying to get him to open him up. And Stallion just didn't bleed. You know, he's a big old guy, man. And poor Bob Roop, his hand was about broke, and they got out of the match. And I remember Ole was cussing Bob Roop, he was cussing Stallion, and Bob Roop said, listen, my hand's broke. I couldn't do nothing else. And that's the only time that I've never seen it work. The poor Stallion got beat to death and and they never could open him up. So Eddie Mansfield caused a lot of trouble, let me tell you.
Yeah. You weren't at the last Fan Fest in Atlanta, were you?
No, no.
I don't think so.
I think he was there, wasn't he?
Yeah, they did a Q&A with him and Dr. D, David Schultz, together.
Yeah. Wasn't he still cussing Ole or something?
Yeah, it was kind of bad taste when he did that, because, you know, Ole's in pretty bad shape now, and he said that it was like karma that he was in a wheelchair.
Well, you know, I've always said that, and you know how I feel about this. If I've got a problem with a guy, why don't I just go to his house? Why do they always wait to these big fan fests to confront the guy? Yeah. You know?
He's had 30 years or something, you know?
Yeah. You know, I remember when Arn wrote his book. You know, Arn wrote his book 20 years ago, and a couple of guys had problems with something Arn had wrote. And I remember at one of the earlier fan fests, somebody was going to go confront Arn, and I laughed because I said, buddy, you know that book's been out about 30 years, you know, guy. What are you thinking? You know? And, why didn't you just go by his house on the way to Charlotte, you know, if you got a problem? But, yeah, I heard that Eddie Mansfield would, but I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't challenge Ole now, even, you know, even in his wheelchair or, you know, having a hard time to walk, I wouldn't challenge him. But yeah, I'd heard that. Mm-hmm. And you know, that's what's so amazing. That's why when this book came out, Jack, buddy, I said, there's not going to be, and we talked, you know, me and Mark James, he was just so professional with it. And he said, George, is there anything in here you want to put in here? Because, you know, I ain't going to kid myself and say, you know what sells. People love to read dirt. They love to hear, you know, the latest mess. And I said, man, I don't want, you know, one of these days I'm going to be in a nursing home about 85 years old, you know, and I'm going to be trying to sell my book to some old lady down the hall, you know, and I don't want to reread all the bad stuff. Mm-hmm. And honestly, for every one bad thing or dark thing, I've seen a million good things. And that's what I really tried to capture, you know, and that's what I shared with Mark James. And he did it so great. You know, it's scary, guys, and y'all know this. You know, when you give your life to somebody and say, okay, trust me. And to a wrestler, I kept telling Mark James, you know, telling a wrestler to trust me is the awfulest thing you can do, you know, because we don't trust anybody, not even our own family, you know, much less a guy that's going to take my life. And you never know how it's going to turn out. But, buddy, that's one thing I can say about Mark. He didn't change one thing unless he ran it by me. And I sent him over 300 pictures. And he said, George, we'll use every one of them. And he did. And it was hard. I mean, we butt heads a few times on things he said, trust me, but I'll be the first to admit that I'm so glad I did. Because everything that he told me to trust him, it turned out perfect. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing is, you know, I'm just an old boy from the mountains of North Carolina, and I didn't want that changed. You know, I told Mark years ago, Jack, I had an opportunity to do a book. What bit I had saved up, and I went and sat down with a guy that was an editor, and he'd wrote some books at his kitchen table. He looked through my book for about 20 minutes, and he looked right at me. And I should have punched him in the head, but I didn't. But he looked right at me. He said, "You write like I wrestle," and that just crushed me. And so I grabbed my book, you know, and told him where he could go, jump in the lake, and I just went out the front door, and I said, my book will never get published, if that's how they feel about it. And so for me to trust Mark, and he would just, I'm just so thankful that he came and just showed me, you know, how great it is. And because, you know, he loves Memphis wrestling as much as I do Charlotte Mid-Atlantic wrestling. So, but I did let him put one picture of the Mid-South Coliseum in there, so we're still good friends.
See, we got
listen, when you see Dusty Rose in the Mid-South Coliseum, wanting to turn the lights off so the light over the ring will shine, and the guy over the building says you can't do that because Jerry Lawler owns the lights, you know, you kind of know who owns Memphis. Let me tell you.
Let's see, we got people on hold. We got R.E.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, guy. How you doing?
I'm doing just great. You're an outstanding man.
Thank you.
And I don't have a question. I'm just going to congratulate you for all your wonderful work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in, R.E.
No problem. Bye.
Let's see. We got Joel calling in from Portugal.
Hello.
Hey, Joel. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Mr. South? Good.
Thank you. Doing real good.
I have just a quick question to ask you, because I read somewhere that, you know, because you guys were talking about shoot interviews, that there is some, I guess you could call it rumor, that sometimes some wrestlers make up stories to make the shoot interviews more interesting. Not every shoot interview is really as legitimate as it sounds. Do you think that happens oftenly? And I know that I would assume that in your case, you most of the things, or all of the things that you say are really legitimate. But do you think that there are the wrestlers there, I don't know, just want to make it more, you know, make it more interesting, so they make stuff up in their shoot interviews?
Well, I think that happens a lot, Joel. But I'll tell you, most of these wrestlers have lived some of the most unbelievable lives in the world. I've always said that old-timer wrestlers should be teaching a college course somewhere because, as I said earlier, you know, I learned more in the back seat of a car with the original Sheik just listening to the stories, and it really teaches you, you know, about life. And a perfect example of what you just asked is years ago when me and Stallion was running the PWF here in the Carolinas, we were getting our results. This is when there were still wrestling magazines out, and we were getting our results put in the magazines. But I knew that there were guys, like you said, Joel, that were calling in these results of shows that never happened. And to put everything in perspective, I couldn't wait to stooge on these guys, Jack. So I called Bill Apter at home, buddy. I'm talking on the backbone. And I had the scoop of scoops. You know, I knew these guys wasn't even running shows, but they were calling in these main event matches that took place in Charlotte. So I told Bill Apter, I said, Bill, I got a scoop. I said, they're giving you results of shows that ain't even happening. And he said, the words of wisdom. He said, George, people just want something to read when they go to the bathroom. That's the greatest words I've ever heard. And I said, excuse me? He said, you think I don't know that? He said, people just want something to read when they go to the bathroom. So, Joel, not to make light of your question, I'm sure, they all say with all of our books that we just all wrote the same stories. We just put our name in, in different stories. And, it's like the old timers used to say, used to be telephone and then, telegraph, and then tell a George or tell a Bruce or something. That's what the old timers used to say. And it's like nothing. If me and Jack and everybody else saw the same car wreck and you ask us different times, what happened, we'd all probably tell you something different. And I'm not saying the guys deliberately try to lie, but because they about don't have to. I'm sure, it's like we joke, even in my book, I made light of it. And Ole's every old timer's book, every place I ever wrestled was sold out. You know that, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every building was standing room only. And I even put it in my book. You know, even when I wrote about a place having a good house, you know, good attendance, I'd say, Ole, it was sold out. Because I joke with Ole about every place he was in his book, he sold out. And so I'm sure guys stretch it a little bit, you know, but that's the neat part. You know, I've heard some of the same stories a million times from some of these guys, and it changes every time I hear it.
Yeah.
But I love that part of it. You know, that's as much of wrestling as, you know, it's just, and I love that part. That's the part that, you know, is missing. Of course, you know, the guys don't ride together anymore. Everybody flies, so there's no stories anymore, you know, to keep up with. But, yeah, but a lot of them, it's like me and Jack were talking, Joe, a lot of them, it's the same old stuff, you know, and I didn't want to even write a book or even do a shoot tape on how tough I was. You know, it's like Nelson Roy used to tell me. He said, you know, Lou Thesz may have been the toughest guy in wrestling, but who knows? We was always afraid to find out, you know? So all these great shooters and these great guys that could stretch you, they probably could, but the truth is they may not could have. But we were just all afraid to try it. So I'm sure that's with the shoot interviews too. I'm sure, you know, we all like to make every place sold out. And I try to capture in my book some of the, you know, every place kind of wasn't sold out sometimes. But some of the best crowds, Flair talked about it in his book. Some of him and Steamboat's best matches was in a high school gym somewhere. And nobody had a video camera. Nobody had a pitch, you know, it could take pitch. It was just a great, great match. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think's neat about it. You know, and I know them boys tried. Listen, I hadn't watched WrestleMania in 20 years. And my son paid for it this past WrestleMania, bought me some pizza and said, Dad, come over. I went to see my grandbabies, but I didn't tell him that. I wanted him to think I was coming to watch wrestling. Guys, listen. And I love WWE and all those guys, but I sat through 20 minutes of WrestleMania, and I took my grandbaby outside. I'm just telling you. I don't know. Bless their hearts, they tried, and it was so rushed, and you say, yeah, they're making $1 million. But see, to me, guys, Joel, and I know I'm getting way off this here, but to me, it meant more to me to have the respect of the old-timers than it did to ever have a full bank account. And that may be hard to understand because people say those guys are making $1 million right now. And I know, and they're all working hard, don't get me wrong, but it's just that, you know, sometimes there's just something missing. And you can put celebrities with it, you can put a palm tree beside the ring, but it still comes down to a match. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, I don't know. I guess I'm just used to things taking its time. And, you know, when you're doing a big show like that, you got to rush everything. But, man. It was hard, let me tell you. So, yeah, to answer your question, Joel, that you asked about 20 minutes ago. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think, you know, and it's hard. You know, a guy puts a camera in your face. What hadn't you talked about? And it's hard sometimes when you try to think about, you know, one of the biggest things that made me mad is that the ink was not dry on this book. I mean, I just got it in my hand. The first question somebody asked me is, when you going to write another one? If I could have got my hands on them, I'd have choked them. You know? I mean, it took me 50 years to write this one. Do they even know what, you know, we put into this? Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure the shoot tapes, I mean, how many interviews, you know, I've heard, you know, lately some of the guys that interview them, we hadn't done it yet, but I think it'd be pretty cool. They, some of the best stuff that's coming out now on DVDs is they'll tell the guys in the you know interviews, say, listen, we haven't turned the camera on yet. We're going to do it in 30 minutes, but they really got the camera going. So that's the best part, when you see a guy sitting there in a chair and just see, you know, he's bored to death and just see the way they act, thinking the interview ain't started yet. That's some of the most, you know, the greatest stuff. So, you know, how many questions can you answer, you know? But I, you know me, I always find room to talk. But I got more hits on my Facebook this week when, Jack, you did the graphic about me being on tonight, and I just put under it, I wonder what we'll talk about. You know, there's a picture of my book on every page, you know, and people are writing in, what are you going to talk about tonight? And I think what's funny, Jack, is, you know, I put this book over as the second greatest book ever written. You wouldn't believe the people that come up to me and say, what was the first? You know, of course, I tell them the Bible, but they say, man, that Ric Flair book was good, wasn't it? You know, I have to kind of remind them, no, I'm talking about the Bible here, buddy.
Joel, did you have another question? Or?
No, it was just it. Thank you for this elucidating answer that you gave.
Thank you so much, buddy.
Okay.
Thanks, Joel. Of course, you talk a lot about, and I agree with you, the greatest wrestler of all time, Nature Boy Ric Flair. And I really liked the one story where you talked about, I don't want to give too much away from your book, but that, you know, he slipped you a $50 bill.
Yeah. And, you know, that picture I've got with Rick, you know, he was training, working out over our hotspots, our training center, and I wanted to get a picture of him holding my book. And this is what was so neat. When I got over there, he'd just finished training. He was sweating. He was ready to go home. And it was so funny because when I walked up to him, he said, George, he said, I'm not going to autograph anything else. You know, because every time I see him, I had him sign something, you know. And so we kind of laughed. He had his wife with him and his daughter. And I said, no, Rick, I want to show you something. So for a brief Kodak moment, it was the greatest moment of my life. I showed him the book. And, of course, Rick's still to this day got more energy than a 19-year-old. I mean, he's just on the go all the time. And he said, man, it is great. And he got ready to walk off. And I reached up and just grabbed his elbow and pulled him back. And I said, no, Rick, I want to show you something. And I'd already had it marked, and I opened up my book to the chapter about him. And I just, for a brief moment, just me and him, he's sweaty, he's ready to go, get out of that place. But I just told him how much he meant to my career and how much he meant to my book. And what was so neat, Jack, he opened up my book. He opened up the story about him, and there's a picture in there with him and Gordon Soley. When his hair was out, he had the U.S. belt, and he's one of them great suits that he is. And he called his wife over there to look at that picture, and he said, honey, he said, nobody told me no then. And I love that. You know, that was just the greatest moment in the world. And I'd ask him, I said, Rick, could you please, you know, pose? He said, man, don't you never. He said, you don't have to ask me that. He said, you know I would. So that was a good moment there. And, you know, that time that I got knocked out on TV, you know, and Rick will probably think, George, you know, nobody needs to know that, but, you know, it's just part of the business. The guys taking care of each other. But I mean, I was hurt so bad that day on TV. I mean, nobody knew what was wrong with me. I mean, you know how when you get a stinger and you can't move, but slowly your feeling will come back to you. But I was laid up in the ball on the floor, and everybody knew. They couldn't even get the paramedics there. And, you know, and Flair just walked by, and he put a $50 bill in my hand. And I never, ever forgot that. Just little things like that. You know, the time I saw him take up for Wahoo there at the old Coliseum when the security guard wouldn't let Wahoo in. It was almost like it was meant to be, you know? Mm-hmm. Here's Wahoo walking in, his son, and the security guard's fixing to throw Wahoo out because he don't know who Wahoo is. And, man, just like it was a movie of the week, buddy, here comes the Nature Boy. And politely he explained to this security guard who this guy was and that Wahoo's blood, you know, built this Coliseum. And, man, you know, I can't make this stuff up, mm-hmm. you know? And I wanted to make sure I put that in there. So, to me, you know, people always tell me, Rick probably needs to retire. And I said, buddy, no, he don't. You know, because he's my connection, yeah, you know. And I tell everybody, it ain't hard to figure. What Rick's got, you can't teach. Mm-hmm. You know, he loves this business more than anything in the world. And he's just first class to me. I'll tell you a funny story. It's not even in the book. This just happened about 6 months ago. I got a pastor friend in South Carolina, Jack, that loves Ric Flair, and any chance he can get to go to the hospital and visit somebody, he likes to take something that Rick has signed. So we'd got this little replica belt, and I'd called Rick, and I'd asked Rick, I said, could you just sign this belt? I'd love to meet you anywhere, but I'd like to send it to my pastor in South Carolina, and he's going to take it to this lady in the hospital. Stuff that fans don't even hear about. Rick said, I'll tell you what, said, I got to fly out of town. He said, but if you could meet me, it's just 6 months ago. He said, if you can meet me in Charlotte at like 6 a.m., because this flight was leaving at 7. He said, I'll be glad to sign it. So I went over to Charlotte. We met at this little corner there. There's a Burger King. Ain't even open yet. I'm talking, the birds ain't even awake. Flair comes pulling up. He gets out. I lay the belt across his trunk. He's autographing the belt. Next thing I know, Jack, I hear somebody go, woo! Buddy, I look behind me, and there's a bus driver. Big city bus. He's got like 300 people on this bus. Every one of them recognized Ric Flair at 6:15 in the morning. Next thing I know, the bus pulls in the Burger King parking lot. There's 300 people trying to get to Ric Flair. And I'm thinking, here it is. I'm going to get Flair killed at 6 a.m. at a Burger King. So he signed the book real quick, was real nice. I mean, signed the belt, real nice. And, of course, we both, drove off into the sunset and got out of there. But it was a neat thing because don't tell me Ric Flair don't draw. Yeah, it may have just been 300 people at 6 a.m., but everybody on that bus wanted this. You know what I'm saying? Now, how many wrestlers could you put on a street corner and anybody even care? That's the part that I still am just such a big mark about. And, Ric Flair will always be, he was the best.
Yeah.
And,
I would say even this last couple of years, I thought some of his stuff was the best moments I've ever seen on TNA Wrestling. Like when he was doing the stuff with he was Black Machismo for a while.
I love the Jay Lethal stuff.
Yeah, I really thought it was just one of the best things I've ever seen.
See, what nobody gets it with Rick, if you let Rick just be Rick, don't give him something that, some writer from Hollywood has written. Mm-hmm. What are they going to tell Ric Flair? And if they just let Rick be Rick, and, I'm telling you, I just wish, I want to see Flair and Steamboat one more time. I know that may never happen, but, my goodness.
I was hoping we would see it after Steamboat did the comeback at WrestleMania a couple of years ago, because he was still really, he could go out there and perform. He was great.
Listen,
so I was hoping
I'm telling you, the greatest thing I ever seen, I've seen everything in this business. Listen, I've seen, when I was training little Ricky, I may have shared this my last times, Big Ricky used to drop in and watch us train, his son. And, he's sitting over on this couch. We got a nice little sofa in the training for people to come to watch. And Steamboat just got off a plane, man, had a, nice dress shirt, just came off, work and, dress pants. He's sitting there watching, and boy, he just got that blood a-boiling. The next thing I know, he jumps in the ring and he shoots Charlie Dreamer off and drops down, and Charlie comes back. And guys, I'm telling you, he throwed the beautifulest arm drag I've ever seen in my life. That quick. And then he just got out of the ring and went and sat back on the sofa. And I'm standing there, my mouth dropped open. I just turned the lights off and went home. How can you train after that? And to this day, that was the most beautiful. I've always seen his arm drag, but to be that close, and it goes back to what I said earlier, that you just get that foundation. And, boy, I tell Charlie Dreamer to this day, I said, boy, am I sure glad you knew how to take an arm drag. There wasn't no room for error on that, buddy. And it just, man. And so those feuds like that, I miss. And, but Rick's always going to be the greatest. I mean, I put that in the book, and, if I ever get him to slow down, I want him to read it. And, I mean, I was just very thankful. I mean, a lot of guys used to depend on him. Me and Ricky Morton was talking about this the other day, how we used to depend on guys that was feeding our family. See, a lot of times you'd see Flair against Dusty Rhodes in the main event, but the fans wouldn't think about the other 20 guys on that card that they were feeding, that we depended on that. And that's the part I miss, and it's just that brotherhood there that's, I don't know, it may still be there. But, I'd shared before, when Ricky Morton worked that single program with Rick, we were so excited for Ricky. Nowadays guys would be jealous. They'd be saying, man, that should be me up there, not Ricky Morton. Mm-hmm. But see, I was happy for Ricky because I knew, the houses were going to be good and we were all going to make money. And, that's the thing. I just have so much appreciation for these guys I joke with people that I bought 3 houses, but it was those guys just by letting me ride their coattails. And that's what was so amazing. Now, the guys got big contracts and they work hard, don't get me wrong, but, they don't really have to rely on each other, like we did. Mm-hmm. And I just was so glad I come along when I did. I'm so thankful for that part of it because I don't know if breaking into business now would be the same thing. There's a lot of guys down in Florida that are hoping, and I know there's some good guys down there, but you just don't know. There's not enough places. That's why I try to run as many shows as I can. I just want guys to have a place to work and to learn. And, I tell guys all the time, I even put a quote in my book, Tracy Smothers, who I love to death. He said, even New Jack talked about him, Tracy saw me stop a match one time. I had 4 of my students in there. and they kept messing up everything they tried. And we had a good little house, good crowd. I went out there and stopped it right in the middle. Dusted all of them. Said, would y'all calm down and just do it again? And I made them do the whole match over. Tracy told me that night, he said, man, I've seen and done a lot of things. He said, but that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. So, you know, but I tell fans, if you know, especially when you can't do it on TV, of course, but, you know, if you mess up, just do it again. Honestly. If you don't fix it then, when are you going to fix it? And you ought to hear guys go, you can't stop in the middle of a match and do it again? Yeah, you can. You know, and so that's the one thing because believe me, I've messed up. There's been so many finishes over the years that I forgot to kick out on, or, you know, and even when it was the top guy's fault, they blamed you. And what are you going to say? You know, right. You had to take the blame for it. So,
real quick too about Flair, because it's something we hear a lot about on the internet, and then that they a lot of guys, if the wrestling company thinks they have a big ego, they try to humble them. And I've always thought that really, like, the top guys have to have a certain amount of ego to really make it to the top. And at the same time, like your stories about Ric Flair, it doesn't mean he's like, you know, he's a bad guy or anything. It just means you have to have a certain amount of ego if you're going to be a real big star. Would you
exactly
agree with that?
Right. I totally agree. Yeah, and because I don't think the fans really understand the pressure, especially when, you know, there'll never be a world champion that wrestles 364 days a year again. There'll never be one like Rick did. And what they don't understand is I don't know if he ever had a bad match. I mean, he would, you know, the matches I had with him on TV were just unbelievable. And people still talk about a 20-minute match I had with Ric Flair 20 years ago. That level, you had to be cocky. I mean, you had to be, because, see, that's the thing that, you know, no room full of investors or no room full of sponsors will ever understand, or stock market or anything. This business is still about somebody's going to take my job. And I don't care if you're trying to get in through Florida. I don't care if you're trying to go to WWF. That's the part of our business that will never change. If somebody comes in, somebody's got to leave. And I don't care who you are. There's some great guys in this business, but they still, in their heart of hearts, are saying, this guy's trying to take my job. And see, that part, I love it. That part will never change. So you got guys that, and honestly, why shouldn't Rick be cocky? Because ain't nothing come along that even competes with him. I'm telling you. You know, so he's still, you know, and you have to be. There's a, you know, when you know, Black Bart used to tell me, he used to do TV matches as Ricky Harris and then become Black Bart. And he used to tell me that as Ricky Harris, it was the funnest time of his career because nobody depended on him to make money or draw money. But all of a sudden he becomes Black Bart, and they give him a belt, tag him with Ron Bass, and he's all of a sudden responsible. And it opened my eyes to the way things are. And all of a sudden you got guys and their families that are dependent on you to go out there and draw a good house. And a lot of times, you know, the old-timers didn't really have to straighten them up in the ring or stretch them because you just didn't stay around long, you know, because if you was a jerk, you didn't last. Because back then we were together 7 days a week. We were together with each other more than we were with our families. And so if you was a jerk, nobody wanted you. You know, I knew a lot of guys that couldn't really work a lot, but they kept jobs for 20 years because they were good guys in the dressing room. They were good guys, you know, to have around. And then I saw some of the best, you know, workers in the world that were complete jerks, and they didn't last. My favorite story I put in the book is when this tag team, if I ever think of their names, I'm going to call you first, Jack, and we're going to put it on the radio. But these two guys from Florida, the most cockiest, jacked up guys, I'll think of their name one day. But anyway, I can't get it. I can't remember it from my book. But anyway, they worked Dr. Death and Mike Rotundo. And these guys were jerks. And the match was awful. They came back to the dressing room. Before they ever even got to the dressing room, these guys were loud, obnoxious, and they let Dr. Death and Mike Rotundo know how bad they thought the match was. And I swear in less than 5 seconds, Dr. Death and them shoved these guys in trash cans. And what was so funny, and I tried to paint the picture in my book, but I didn't do a good job, it was like cartoons. I mean, these guys were bent in the middle, and their arms and legs were sticking out of the same hole. It was the greatest thing I ever seen. And Like, I put in the book, if you want to make a point, I don't think you make it towards Dr. Death and Mike Rotundo.
Right.
You may need to wait on that.
That's only just being a jerk and just being dumb.
Yeah, being dumb. And see, that's all I ever want. And I tell these guys now, you just try to keep a job. And now, of course, you got guys that's got contracts. A lot of guys sitting home, even with WCW, they were making money sitting at home. Mm-hmm. And I actually saw guys, and I didn't put this in the book, but it got so bad there in WCW that guys were actually going out trying to have a bad match. I mean, you'd hear guys before they went to the ring say, "Let's see how bad we can make this." And that's when I knew we in trouble. Because you'd think, man, even dumb old George knows you're supposed to go out there and have the best match. Mm-hmm. But it was just, I don't know. I know contracts are good for the guys, but you take those contracts away and say, okay, I'll pay you the money you're worth if you draw it. But if you don't draw it out there, I'm not going to pay it. that would change a few things. Mm-hmm. I told a guy the other day, you give me Les Thatcher, give me my ring and my old ring truck and every Armstrong boy, and I'll go on the road with these guys, and I'll make $1 million. No overhead. We'll eat bologna and a loaf of bread every night, and we'll all make money, buddy. I'm telling you. They may not do that, but I'd love to do it.
Right. That was in your book, too, is about, getting a ring built, and then you say, today you can get one off High Spots, or, you can get a ring anywhere, or you could find someone to train you. And that, it's easier to get in the business today, but do you think when it was harder, you respected it more? You had more character?
I mean, I told him in my book about asking, David Crockett of the Crockett's one time at the matches, where did wrestlers get their boots from? Mm-hmm. And man, he cussed me for 3 days. And I'm thinking, man, I probably shouldn't have asked that. But it was very prestigious, and it was very, secretly, and you didn't know. And it really made you want it that much more. But I run into it every day. Is nowadays people, I told you a story of the guy that walked up and he had a VHS. Now, this wasn't even a DVD. He had a VHS tape of the best of Ric Flair. And he walks in my training camp, and he wanted to use my ring. I said, do you mean you want to train? He said, no, I done been trained. I said, who trained you? He said, this Ric Flair VHS. So I said, okay, I can't touch that. But that's the simpleness of it now. And I'm not saying guys don't want it, but it comes, the biggest conception for me, and I may just be an old grouchy old-timer, but the concept of paying somebody to train is way over my head, guys. I'm just telling you that right now. And I know you can say, guys, they just want to go to Florida. You got a family. But I never got paid to train. And I would never pay somebody to train. And see, that's where that cockiness we talk about. Yeah, if you've got enough cockiness in your ability, Wahoo used to tell me all the time, forget about the money. The money will come. If you got enough confidence in your own ability, the money's going to come. And see, it's all backwards now. I'm telling you, and I guess that's with anything. Now, I know guys got to make a living, don't get me wrong, but, if it was back in the day and they sent a group of guys to Florida, just like when Dusty sent us to Kansas City, buddy, you go out there, you leave your wife and your kids here. You had to. And you go out there with a group of guys that's chasing the same dream. You find the cheapest motel that you could find, and you learn this business. And see, that's the thing. When we went to a territory years ago, we didn't go with the intentions of living there. You know what I'm saying? Nowadays, guys go there and buy $300,000 homes. But when we went to a place, Portland or Florida, we didn't go to live there. We went there to learn and to wrestle 7 days a week. And, if you made a little bit of money, you just had to have confidence. Because people tell me now, 50 years old, that I'm still cocky and got an attitude. I said, listen, if I don't believe in George South, nobody else is, Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing with Ric Flair. Ric Flair still thinks, and he's probably right. He can outwork anybody out there, honestly. And he's probably right. I know it'd be more entertaining than some of that stuff we see.
Yeah. Well, I say this all. I really think that's a big problem in wrestling, because they always say that the different companies on TV, they try to humble everybody, but I don't think that's a positive thing. I think wrestlers on a normal job. If you're a star on TV, you should have an ego. You should have a cockiness to you, because I think the people watching that can get that from them and think, this guy's a big star.
you know, and it's so simple, Jack, how you rate that. You know, when I was a little boy, there used to be a guy. He was the Mid-Atlantic heavyweight champion, Avalanche Buzz Tyler, for a short time, and he kind of got out of the business and disappeared. He worked in Kansas City a lot, but I remember in high school, junior high, I was on a wrestling team, and we went to a tournament somewhere, and it got around the school that Buzz Tyler lived up the street. And it was just that buzz of, here's Buzz Tyler, you know, lives up the street. Next thing you know, there's 300 people up here at this house. And it was Buzz Tyler's house. But I said that to say that mystique of just hearing about a wrestler eating at the Waffle House or somewhere. You know, all through my book, I tell the stories. If I heard that Big Sweet Hansen was eating at Waffle House, he may have only ate there one time in his life. But I'd hang out at that Waffle House for 7 days in a row, waiting for Big Sweet to come by. So that part of our business, if you say, okay, so-and-so's down at the Walmart, does anybody even care to go? And you don't know nowadays. It may be they've seen so much of them on TV, but if those guys, and that's where it goes back to, if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is. You know, I do a lot of Walmart autograph grand openings with Ivan Koloff, who's been in the business and who I love tremendously, and people still... You know, Jack, you never hear a fan come up and say, I wish wrestling would go back to the way it was last week. You know, they never say that.
Right.
It's always, I wish it would go back to the way it was. And you just wish you could pick these people's brains. And, you know, Sandy Scott told me before he died, and I put this in my book, that wrestling has gotten over the people's heads. And I knew exactly what he meant. And what he meant is, sometimes I'm telling you, you sit there and scratch your head, and you're thinking, what in the world are they doing?
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you should. And I go by. I'm still a big fan, a big mark of wrestling, and I still. That's why I watch so much of my old Mid-Atlantic stuff. I got Ted DiBiase stuff from Mid-South that I still watch. You know, me and him always joke because people know him as a $1 million man, but I'll always know him as a member of the Rat Pack. You know, and I mean, just that stuff was so good, and that's why I watch that to this day. Mm-hmm. People think, you know, people always giving me, you know, the latest DVDs of WWE. I just give it to my son, you know, and so that part of it, you know, just I don't know. It just, but the guys I respected the most was the cocky ones, you know, was the ones that you knew they had to go out there and draw money, because back then if you didn't draw money, you were gone. It wasn't this politic junk. It wasn't, you can't fire me because I'll sue you, or you know, that's why I kind of laughed a couple of weeks ago with that mess with Jericho overseas when he stomped that flag.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe, with gas prices $10 a gallon, we're at war with, you know, overseas. Our soldiers are dying, and they're going nuts over what Jericho done. Mm-hmm. And that's how I'm so confused on wrestling. Don't you want your bad guys to have that much heat?
Yeah, it's a positive thing.
It's a positive thing, wasn't it? Who was it? Wasn't it Bradshaw a couple of years ago that done the big Hitler march?
Yeah, he did the goose step at Germany.
Man, they wanted to stone him and throw him in an ocean. I'm thinking, man, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
I mean, and on my YouTube actually.
You know what? I love that because that's what you want your bad guys to do. Mm-hmm. And because see, the way it used to be is the good guy would come and get revenge for that foreign country, that Jericho.
Right.
But what I thought was funny about that, ain't nobody said nothing to the fan that disgraced the flag, you know, that threw it in the ring. But don't you want your bad guys having that much heat? I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And when JBL did it, WWE, I mean, they didn't do anything to him. They actually then put the belt on him. But now Jericho got suspended for doing it.
Yeah. That just, well, I don't want to say funny because he got suspended, but I'm just thinking, you know, ain't that what your bad guys, you know, and anybody that knows Jericho knows his heart, knows that there was no disrespect meant. That's just you're being a bad guy, you know? And Lord knows some of the stuff they used to. You know, I watched the Mod Squad when Dusty sent us to Kansas City. I watched the Mod Squad paint Rufus R. Jones's back, big old yellow stripe with yellow paint right down his back. And man, we sold out for 3 weeks out there. Of course, I always thought was so funny is Rufus came up with that. You know, now everybody's saying, "Man, you can't do that." But Rufus came up with that. And it just, but if you notice all of those great angles like that, in the end, the good guy always got revenge. That's the thing. And now, I don't know, I watch it now, I don't know who's the heel and who's babyface.
Yeah.
I'm all confused. I'm thinking, what in the world?
And like you said, things get too complicated now. If you really think of like the real big angles or the big feuds that stick out, it's basically this guy wants to beat up this guy, or this guy wants to get this guy's belt. It's just a real basic thing at the end.
Well, one of the hottest feuds in the Carolinas was Blackjack and Ric Flair, and it was simply when Rick came out on TV and tore up a $5 cowboy hat that Willie Nelson had give Blackjack. That started that whole feud. And of course, Blackjack comes out the next show and tears up Rick's robe. And that started a feud. It wasn't over, I'm sleeping with your wife, or I ran over your dog, or I kidnapped your kid, or anything like that. It was over a $5 hat. Bill Eadie tells the story of the Masked Superstar that he paid 50 cents for a cigar. That cigar that he shoved in Mighty Igor's eye and made, thousands of dollars from it was from a 50-cent cigar. And he actually took that same angle over to Japan. And I think he stuck the same cigar in Inoki's eye over there. It may not have been Inoki, but he did the same angle over there. So he paid $1 for 2 cigars and lived off of it,
Right.
And that's what I used to think was so neat, is the simplest. That's why in my book I wrote, when my superstar cut Paul Jones's hair on TV, I went and got a pair of scissors and cut my hair. I mean, I love Paul Jones so much that I thought, man, I love him so much, he ain't going to be the only one walking around with a funny haircut. I'm going to, too. And that's probably why I'm so nuts to this day. But that's how much I believe that stuff. And just really thought, man, that's where, that's how you draw money right there. And now they'll throw a guy off a building, they'll run over him with a truck, blow him to pieces, and put him back together. And wonder, I loved in Ollie's book, he wrote about when they didn't know what to do with him towards the end of WCW. They still had to pay him. They said, well, just go down to the power plant and hang out. That's all we want you to do. He said, all right. This is when Eric Watts, who I love too. Eric's another one that there should be a job for him in wrestling. I mean, really. And but anyway, Ollie said he walked in power plant one day, and they had about 30 guys there, and they're all doing their squats, and they all look like $1 million. But he said he got Eric Watts in the ring. First thing he did, he smacked the crap out of Eric. Just smacked him. Didn't say a word. Smacked him. He said everybody in that room, everybody in that building got quiet. And Eric knew what Ole was doing. That Ole's fixing to show these guys how to work. And he smacked Eric again. And next thing you know, Eric shoved Ole. Next thing you know, here's 40 guys trying to break him up. So Ole stopped in the middle of all of it, and he told every one of them guys, he said, for about 5 minutes, y'all believed that I was going to kill him. And they all believed it. I mean, they all were scared to death of Ole. And see that, and I love that whole lesson. I know I probably butchered it to death, but that was so neat, because in 5 minutes, they believed in Ole Anderson, and that's gone. I'm not saying you got to walk up and smack Eric Watts every time you see him, but
right.
Boy, Ole had those guys' attention, for a minute. And those guys were in the business. So, that part of it right there, and it comes down to I blame the fans too. It ain't just the wrestlers or the promoters. The fans have to want to believe. Now they think they're smarter than we are. And I don't know if fans are even fans anymore. I never, and I yell to this day, young kids that have been told that we're fake, and, they want to come up and look under the ring. They want to see what's under the ring. And then it's like they're in shock when they find out there's nothing under there. They think there's like padding or a spring or something, and you just want people, and I tell them, I've stopped many of the show and just said, will you people be fans?
Yeah.
What are y'all doing? And your life ain't better if you find out how we do it. And I put that in the book. I never wanted to know. I told you Jack, last time we talked, I told you I used to love to take Paul Jones when he lived in Charlotte. I used to love to take him out to eat, because that's when I'd love to hear his stories. And we're sitting at Wendy's one day, and he used to love to go to Wendy's, and he was waiting on our food, and he said, me and Blackjack was good friends. And I said, no, you wasn't, Paul. I mean, I'm 48 years old when he's telling me this. He said, no. He said, me and Ole used to beat each other to death and then go out to eat together. And, you know, Paul's got this dry sense of humor. And I said, no, you didn't, Paul. Please don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that. He said, oh, yeah. He said, man, he said, that time I turned on Steamboat, he said, he knew I was going to do it. He said, we're good friends. And, you know, I'm sitting there arguing with him. I said, Paul, we're going to leave right now. You know, really. I mean, I'll never take you out to eat again. Because even at 47 years old, I still wanted to believe that he hated Ole and Gene, you know? And so I think the fans, I blame them a little bit. You know, it's like I never wanted to know and still don't how a magician takes a rabbit out of his hat. I don't want to know that, you know? And that's what I thought was funny about that TV special. You know, the wrestlers reveal their secrets. And I watched a little bit, 5 minutes of it, and that wasn't even how we reveal them. I don't know where they come up with this stuff at. I thought, man, that ain't what we do. But anyway, I just, you know, we all long for it to go back the way, you know, when I used to have to cut grass, and I'd take every penny to go to the magazine store and just to buy my wrestling magazine. And I tell you, when I went to New Jersey a couple weeks ago, I mean, I'm talking Mil Mascaris, Muda, every name in the business for 2 days. And the one person I was more excited about meeting than anybody was that George, I never say his name right, but Napolitano, you know, that one photographer?
Yeah.
He was there. And I had never met him. And, you know, he's taking pictures and still look great. And I just remember all of those magazines with his pictures in it. And, of course, I got a picture made with him, all these stars, and I wanted to meet him because that was such a part. You know, I'm just so glad to see him still doing it, you know, and, you know, I know there's no magazines left, but that was a neat thing for me, you know, to be up there and just to meet him, because I never had a chance to meet him, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I know it's, you know, it's still around Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and it's, you know, not quite the same used to be, but it was still pretty cool for us to get in a couple issues, because, you know, I grew up reading them, and it's like, oh, man, we got some of our interviews in the Pro Wrestling Illustrated, so
I love that.
For me.
You know, I started out in the business, and you know, as Iron Man Mark Davis. I wanted to be called Paul Jones, but he was still, you know, there was a Paul Jones, so that may not have worked. But and I started Gene Gordon. I don't know if y'all remember him, but he used to be a big photographer back in the Wrestling Review magazines, and one of the really first big name photographers. And he was taking pictures of us, and I was Iron Man Mark Davis, and came out to the Road Warriors music. You can believe that, Iron Man, and he started getting my name in magazines. Well, I was buying up every one of them, showing them to my friends, and they thought I was lying. You know, they said, your name's George South. I said, I can't do nothing right, guys. I was messing that up. I said, man, I'm going to quit being Iron Man. I went to being George South. That was so forget that, buddy. Now when I started getting my name in there, it was kind of cool then. But I'm like you. I still got the first magazine I was ever in, you know. But I remember my friends said, that ain't you. Your name ain't Mark David. I said, what have I done? So
back to just your point about the fans. I think you can believe in it without necessarily believing in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I feel that same way, buddy. I do. And you know, it's like I made the joke earlier when we first started about when fans said, well, you didn't try to kill him tonight. And I'm thinking, duh, you know, wouldn't I go to jail if I did? So, you know, that's what we're talking about is you can, you know, I go to, and that's what I try to instill in my students is, you know, usually these fans, especially in the Carolinas, they've had a hard day at work. They've probably been fighting with their husband or their wife, and the kids just want to get out and they want to go be entertained for a little bit. And if you can just bring them in and feed them a hot dog and just let them see some good wrestling and just let them forget about everything. They know they got to go back to the real world, you know, when they leave. You know, Blackjack Mulligan told me one time the two things, and I've said this a bunch too, two things that promoters or bookers or matchmakers now, whatever you call them, would never touch would be a man's family or church. They would never write about that because that was real. That was too real in a man's life. They would never mess with his family or his faith that he believed in, and, you know, and death. They kind of wouldn't touch those three things. But as you know, over the years, they blowed all that out of the water. You know, they ain't nothing sacred anymore. But back in the day, they wouldn't touch those things because it was real. It was real. So even in our business, there were certain things that, even promoters wouldn't go near because it was too close to home with a lot of these guys. And but now, buddy, there ain't nothing off limits now. I don't care what it is. They'll try to draw money with it.
Yeah, which is weird though, like what we were talking about earlier, because they will do stuff like to be offensive, but at the same time, it's more PC in some things, like with Jericho and the flag. Yeah,
and that's what's so amazing. I mean, and it's like, and the perfect illustration is I use it a lot in some of these churches. When Mel Gibson come out with that Passion of the Christ, he really got ridiculed because they said it was so gross. They said that he really went overboard with the way Jesus looked and the way Jesus was beaten, and it should have been an R rating and all this kind of stuff. But then, and nobody ever picked up on this, but he's on there at the same line, the same interview saying, and I love horror movies, but he was on there saying, well, they just cut, Freddy Krueger just cut somebody's head clear off, last week, and blood squirting out. But nothing was ever said. And kind of in the same light, I know exactly. I mean, Jericho got more coverage by stepping on that flag than any rock and roll show he's done, any concert he's done or anything. The only thing I'd have done different is I'd have had a Fozzy T-shirt on is what I'd have had when I'd have done it, man, and with my tour dates on the back. See, that's what I'd have done. But it just really makes you think, what are people thinking? I mean, and I'm not saying don't disrespect the flag, but you got to take it. We're talking about wrestling here. That's why years ago when Wahoo would punch a fan or something, and a couple of them really, were serious, but most of them got thrown out of court. Because really, a judge would say, we are talking about wrestling here, and nobody really, I even said in the book, most people don't even want to admit that they watch wrestling until they want free tickets. But when they want free tickets, all that changes. Let me tell you, man, I'm the biggest fan in the world,
I've been going to horror conventions. You brought up horror things, and this is one in Atlanta. Roddy Piper was there, and he was doing stand-up. And this is primarily, not wrestling fans. It's movie fans. And he's doing a stand-up, and you could see, like, people knowing Hulk Hogan and stuff. But he was telling stories about, like, Chief Jay Strongbow, and the fans, everyone there was reacting. So you could tell, like, they had to be pretty into wrestling to get all the stories he was talking about.
Yeah. Well, I shared the first comic book convention in Charlotte that I was asked to speak at. And there's a huge comic book store. It's been here for years. It's such a neat little comic. I just love to see little places like that where you can actually just go in and buy an old-fashioned comic book. I don't know how they stay in business. But anyway, they'd invited me, and they do a huge convention here every year. And they'd asked me to come and speak on a Sunday morning. They said there's people that come in from out of town, kind of like Fan Fest, and they may want to go to a service. And I said, man, I'd love to. So I tried to describe it in my book. I show up in this big banquet room, and all of a sudden, here comes Darth Vader. He comes sitting in, the big Darth Vader guy in his outfit. All of a sudden, here comes Bugs Bunny. All these guys at these comic book conventions are all in their costumes. And this guy comes in thinking he's Batman. And so by the time I got ready to share my testimony and preach a little bit, I look over, and there's 100 people, and everybody's in these costumes. So I'm thinking, man, if I can get through this, I can do anything. I mean, I had Porky Pig, Tasmanian Devil, every horror of Freddy Krueger's over there, and it was really funny because that was my first taste of that. And what you kind of said, Jack, I shared some stories, and those people looked at me like I was crazy. They didn't know who Wahoo McDaniel was or they didn't even know what I was doing there. What's funny is I had Yosemite Sam, and I think it was like Sylvester tell me that they thought I was weird, And so I said, oh, wait a minute here. But I tell you, Jack, I had never been to a horror convention. I know I'm kind of getting off wrestling here, but one came to Charlotte, and everybody knows back in the day I was a big Kiss fan, and still am. I just think it's neat how they've stayed around for so long. But I had never met Ace Frehley, and Ace Frehley was at the convention here in Charlotte.
Yeah, that was like the Mad Monster Party, I think.
Yeah, and I've never been to one of these. And I tell you what was so funny is you see it in the paper, and it's kind of, I guess I've been around wrestling so long, you think that the guy's going to no-show, you know, or you think it's just a promoter it's not really Ace Frehley, you know. So they were here for 3 days. Of course, I was going out of town, but came back Sunday. I said, I'm going to go over there. It was right downtown Charlotte. And so here's the conception of people. When I walked in that horror convention, and this place was packed on a Sunday, too, the last day. As soon as I walked in, I'm not going to lie to you, Jack, 4 people yelled, George South. They said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I was off. I just want to come in here. And what I'm getting at is the people, one guy even said, George, this is the last place I ever thought I'd see you at. Can you believe that? And I started laughing. I said, buddy, let me tell you. I said, if my relationship with the Lord is not stronger than a horror convention, I'm in trouble, Jack. Let me tell you. And you know what was so funny? The next guy was Freddy Krueger, dressed up like Freddy Krueger. He come over to me, and he's in this big costume, and he said, George South. He said, man, he said, you fell off the wagon. I said, what are you talking about? I didn't know the guy. You know, he said, man, he said, I never thought I'd see you here. And see, that's the conception of, okay, George is a Christian and he loves the Lord, but people are nuts. That's basically what I'm getting at, Jack, you know. And I tell you, I had the greatest time of my life. You know who I met that I thought was over like $1 million? I met Linda Blair.
Yeah.
She's sitting there, and she's the most over baby face I ever seen. But, you know, I tell people she could still scare you to death. I'm going to tell you that right now. And it was the neatest thing. I mean, and to end that story, I did get to meet Ace Frehley. And, I mean, here it is. I'm 50 years old, and I still got dreams. But that was the neatest thing. I'm telling you, if wrestling ain't careful, those horror conventions will put us out of business because it was the most non-pressured event that I'd ever been to. You know, as I was walking through there, and you got all these celebrities, and you're afraid to talk to them because you've been in the business so long, you think they're going to charge you like wrestlers do, you know, to talk to you. And but they were just so open. Now, you could buy their gimmicks if you wanted to, but I can't remember his name, but he's that TV show Night Court. Bull, remember the big police officer?
Yeah.
He was there. Man, he was the nicest guy I ever met. So anyway, I don't know why I got on that, but it was neat. It's funny because when I went in to meet Ace Frehley, he looked real good. You know, he's sitting there, and you think he's like the president because he's got all these people around him. And, you know, I've been waiting 50 years to meet this guy. So he's just rushing people through the line and signing, and, you know, he's got his head down, and he's signing. I get there, and I'm thinking, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing for me, Jack. I'm not going to blow it. So I stopped the whole line. I'm thinking, and I said, Ace, if you don't mind, look up. I told him to look up at me. You know, and I said, listen, if I'm going to meet you, you're going to look at me, you know. And so I spent about 10 minutes with him. I said, man, you got me through high school. I know he probably thought, brother, what kind of drug are you on, man? You know, get this guy out of here. But that was neat, you know. And funny thing about that whole story, when I was leaving, I recognized some staff people that was running around with these staff shirts. 10 of those staff guys was local independent wrestlers. Does that not sum up that whole story? I guess they all work for free, I guess, you know. They got them all to be security. But anyway, I just thought that was neat. And Linda Blair was so friendly. That's what wrestlers really need to, you know, I don't think there was a jerk in the place, you know, honestly. And well, don't even get me started on that. But it was just so nice. Linda Blair was taking pictures with everybody, and you can say, yeah, right, that's because she's getting paid, whatever. But she was, you know, she was very nice. And so that was a neat little thing for me, too. I'm still getting, you know, that'll be in my next book, you know, about meeting Ace.
Yeah, I gone to one in Indianapolis last year and this one in Atlanta, and I'll be going to one in Indianapolis here in next month. And there is like this different atmosphere to it. It was the same way. Everyone's like really just open, and I mean, there was no pressure. I mean, you know, you can talk to people. It ain't, I don't know. It's just different. Every convention I've been to, I've told the promoters that they could probably learn a few things. I mean, they had which I marked out for, they had one of the original Ghostbuster cars there. And, of course, my kids were always big fans of Ghostbusters when they were young, but you could go up, and I was afraid to. This is how goofy I am. You could go up and get your picture made with the Ghostbuster car. And everybody's doing it, and they're laughing, and here I am, the old wrestler, afraid to go up there because somebody's going to charge me $50, you know, for a Polaroid. But the guy said, no, you blow the horn, you can sit in it. And, you know, I'm walking out of that place later thinking,
what just happened here? You know, I didn't have to spend a dime, and I got all these pictures. You know, and so anyway, you're right. It's just different, a little relaxed. But yeah, then people couldn't understand what George South was doing at a horror convention. So man.
Do you think, do you run into that a lot of, like, a misconception because you do have faith that maybe people think, well, this guy's got to be real uptight and, and, you know, really strict on it?
And, you know, the most amazing things, I try to tell people, Jack, you know, I'm a Christian that happens to wrestle, you know, and most people think that I'm a wrestler that just happens to be a Christian, and there's a big, big difference. And I've just tried to always say, you know, if I had to work it, you know, if I had to flip hamburgers, there's nothing wrong with that. I'd love that. But, you know, I would still try to live, you know, the life I've lived. And, I mean, I know people watch me. You know, I heard Deion Sanders share his testimony a couple of weeks ago, and he had this church was full. I mean, it was there's 5,000 people there. And the first thing Deion asked, he said, how many of you people know my middle name? And I swear, I'm the biggest Deion Sanders fan in the world, but I didn't know it. And he was just talking about role models, you know, and how people maybe look up to the wrong people. And it was really kind of neat how he summed everything together, but it was just, it makes you stop in your tracks for a minute, because he said, how many of you people know my middle name? Nobody knew it, you know? So I get that a lot. You know, years ago, Dusty Rhodes offered me a beer, and I done give up drinking years ago. I just wasted so much money, and, you know, it was killing me. I just walked away from it. And I remember Dusty Rhodes offered me a beer one time, just to be nice, like, you know, the boys having a beer, and I told him no. And he was real respectful, and that was the end of it. But later on that night, I had one of the guys come up and said, I can't believe you done that. I said, what? And they said, you know, you can't tell the dream no. They said, we can't believe, everybody was on the plane. He said, nobody on the plane believed that you turned down Dusty Rhodes' beer offer, which that was, you know, I was always close with Dusty, no big deal about it. But even then, there was that conception that, you know, okay, you're not really a Christian, it's just a show. And I'm just always, I mess up. People say, now you think you're perfect. And I said, no, I'm not. I mess up more than anybody in the world, and Lord knows, gosh, you know, there's always things in our past that we wish. The one thing I've learned in my whole life, Jay, is, you know, a relationship with the Lord is about going forward. So much of this world wants you to go backwards, you know, and I'm always instilling that in my students. No matter what you've done, man, the sun comes up. You know, in my book, Blackjack told me sitting on his back porch, he said, you know, if you get up in the morning, you wash your face, and you put on a clean shirt, something good is about to happen. Man, I thought that was the greatest thing I ever heard, you know? And I thought, man, if I ever go in the Hall of Fame, that's going to be my speech. I'm telling you. But it was just so simple, and it's so true. So I get that a lot, you know, especially if I'm come out as a bad guy. That's the biggest thing. People come out and say, I don't understand it. Explain it to me. You come out as a bad guy, and then you invite me to church. They don't understand that. And so I'm able to share with them. That's the biggest heat thing I get as a bad guy, is invite somebody to church. They want to kill me, Jack, let me tell you. Talking about New Jack having heat, man, I got guys wanting to kill me when I invite them to church with me.
It's a thing in your book, too, is I never knew this, was when you were wearing the John 3:16 tights, that they wouldn't let you on TV.
Yeah. You know, I'd had them airbrushed, and, you know, I used to go into high schools, and that's what we were talking about, the Jericho thing, is, you know, I used to go, well, it still is today. I can go into high schools, and I would have teachers or athletic directors tell me, okay, you can talk about money, you can talk about, you know, all the cars y'all get, you can even talk about some of the parties you wrestlers go to, but you can't talk about, you know, your religion, or you can't talk about the Lord. They'd tell me that. So I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll get around that. I'll go get John 3:16 airbrushed on my tights. And they can't say a word then. And I used to, you know me, I'm one of the old guys. I only had one pair of tights. So I was doing TV, and that just like I wrote in the book, you know, I was Van Hammer, bless his heart, at one of his first matches. He come out looking like a Greek god, banging his head. Man, he's banging his head for like 20 minutes waiting on me. They had me held up in the dressing room. And what was so comical about that was the time when WCW was trying everything. They had, you know, Johnny B. Bad with the big lip on his butt. They had Diamond Stud and CrossFit, and everybody was like wearing everything on their tights. So that was kind of comical for them to stop me. They stopped me. They said, you can't wear it.
Yeah.
And I usually just say, okay, I understand. But that day I said, I'm going to be a jerk. I said, somebody better tell me why. And boy, they took me in like 3 meetings, guys. I mean, with the big guys. And, they told me if you don't turn them inside out, you're not getting paid. And, I even showed my human side in the book. I said, I'd like to say I grabbed my tights and I jumped in my car and I went home. But the truth is I had to eat, know. So I turned the tights inside out, and they shut down TV for like 40 minutes. And then I just went out there and done the match. But, years went by, and I wrote about this in the book. Last year, a guy called me here in the Carolinas, and right out of the blue, he said he's a youth pastor in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And he said, you don't remember me. He said, but I was in the dressing room that night. He said, I used to come up with Mike Jackson and do jobs on TV. And he said, I was sitting there that night that they made you do that. And he said, I've never forgot it, that stand that you took. And that was kind of neat. That meant more. But the funny thing, I put it in the book, WCW is gone. It's shut down. Vince McMahon bought all their stuff and burned it, So did it really matter if George South had John 3:16 airbrushed on his tights? But I love it now because most people think that it's just my middle name. Or they think my name's John, He's wearing his birthday, March 16th, on his tights, So it's a good conversation piece. But I'm just, whether it's in the ring or out of the ring, I've just always tried to really, it comes, and I don't force it on people. I tell them, you either believe that there is a Jesus or you don't. I don't yell at you. I don't hold it against you if you don't. Listen, some of my best friends to this day, I've actually got more friends that are out of the church than I do in the church. I've got a lot of good pastor friends, but I'm telling you, sometimes church people's as screwed up as anybody. I won't tell you that right now. And that's why I just tell people all the time, I don't argue. You just, if you put your eyes on, when Jim and Timmy Baker went through all that mess here in Charlotte, we got a big heat over that. It's kind of like they blamed all the Christians in the world, and I just simply told people, put your eyes on that cross. If you keep your eyes on that cross, man's going to mess up. I tell people, don't put your faith in me because I'm going to screw up, buddy. It's like Thunderfoot against Italian Stallion. Thunderfoot, Gene Ligon never tied his mask. And I wrote in my book, Stallion shot him off one time. Well, Gene shot Stallion off from a headlock, and he pulled his mask right off. They stop in the middle of the ring, and they're looking at each other. Here's Gene Ligon without a mask on. Stallion's got it in his hand. And I said, now, what do you think a 300-pound man does that's holding a Thunderfoot mask? He gave it back. Gene put the mask on, and they finished the match. So, see, if you screw up like that, you just, start over. So it's just been, I know where I was headed. I got 3 opportunities this coming Sunday on Father's Day to speak, and I love all of them because I never had a dad. That's probably my biggest thing, and I write about it in the book, is I never knew him. He died, at a very young age, and missed out on a lot of stuff, but I'm still able. Somebody had to take that void, and that's really what I've done all these years, is I just put the Lord in that void, and he was my dad. I talked to him just like me and you're talking, and it really helped me. That's why sometimes in the book I really know what the old-timers went to. Many times, I know many old-timers that actually had to go to work and miss proms and miss, I've had to do it, and it just kills you. But you have to go to work. And, you're paying for your kid's birthday, but you can't be there because you have to go to work. And so, old-timers may think I'm nuts and probably don't want nothing to do with me because I tell them about some old story they were involved in, but they're going to know how much that I appreciate them and just how thankful I am. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, there's so many quotes at the beginning of your book from, all the different wrestlers. Just, seeing that and knowing people, wanted to say something, does that really make you, proud of your whole career?
I'm very proud. The guys that know me are kind of laughing because they said that it's just like one of my matches. My book, you go to page 200 before I ever take a bump, They said I had 100 pages of forwards. I love that because these guys didn't have to say anything, and I just love to have those guys in it. They were all of them, and I just, it just meant something. They could have easily said no, I ain't got time to say it or to do it. I mean, it could have said anything. So to have those guys, and that's why I put all that in the front, is those guys meant as much to me, and I just talked to little Ricky Steamboat 2 days ago, and he'd went on the road a couple of days with WWF and worked some dark matches, and he said that his dad was still talking about my book. And that's not an ego thing that I'm saying. It's just, it made me feel good that, and that's one reason, the book, I wanted something that the guys would throw in their bags. I know how wrestlers are. I know how I am. And, you've got your wrestling bag. That's the most important part. Most important part. I mean, if you pick Bobby Eaton up to this day to go to a town, you better have a Greyhound or a U-Haul. I'm telling you, every pair of tights he's ever had is in his bag. But I wanted a book that I could give to the boys and they could just throw in their bag and keep it with them and read it and maybe encourage them a little bit. And that's one reason I love the book the way it is. I didn't, Mark took 700 pages and condensed it to this, and I'm very, very happy with it because the guys have got it and they take it with them. And, and it's neat for me. I don't do it as an ego thing. I mean, Road Warrior Animal just read it and he loved it. And just because those guys, those guys meant a lot to me. And I didn't write about those guys in that book for them to see it. It's just, and it's hard, guys. I'm going to tell you, y'all know that. You got to put a book together, and you're thinking of stuff. I have fans call me now, and they can tell me what tights I wore in 1980. Where's them black boots you had that looked like Dick Slater's in 1984? And I don't even know where my car keys are right now. And I'm thinking, how do you remember that? So I knew this book had to be, and I tell you, the one thing we left out that I agreed on, I have a list. Some fan, I don't know where they get this stuff. Some fan sent me a list of every WWF match I've ever had. I mean, they listed and they were right. They listed the building, the attendance, who I wrestled, the finish, what I had on, and I was going to kind of put that in there, but we kind of decided, because I didn't want people to think I just did WWF. I wanted them to see and feel, if I didn't have all those results from Mid-Atlantic and Smoky Mountain, and so that kind of was a good decision that Mark suggested that I thought was great in the end. I didn't want to do it for one territory, not the rest. But so you'll always get that. I mean, I just mostly when people say you can't be a Christian and be a wrestler, I've had talk show people do it and all that. Try to catch you off guard, and I just keep trying to do what I do, and it's just a neat thing. I know what a wrestling ring will do. I've seen preachers that try to get people's attention and can't do it. But you put up a wrestling ring, and I've had preachers come up to me and say, how in the world do you do that? We've been trying to just minister and love on these people for years. They won't even answer the door for us. But, you put a WCW replica belt on your shoulder and go to a door, somebody's going to open it, Jack. Let me tell you.
All right. I'll have to try that. No, I'm just...
Yeah.
I always think the best wrestling books are the ones that you can really tell, are in their own words. And
I love that.
Not just, ones that are maybe just, reading the Wikipedia page. And and even some of the ones I like are rather negative, but you could tell, it's written by them. And I think, when you read this, you can really tell it's in George South's words. And you really tell that, you love wrestling and you had fun throughout your whole wrestling career. And I think that's,
I wanted to feel like me and you're sitting around talking. When you're reading it, I've had Mike Mooneyham and a couple of guys tell me that. They said, I felt like we were sitting or we're in the car making a town, and we're just talking. And that's, it made me feel so good. And I appreciate what you just said. I just wanted you, when you read, I want you to feel like, man, George is right here. Which may not be a good thing. I don't know. But bless your heart, Jack. You're probably saying, George, I done heard all that, okay? Gosh.
Let's see here. We got Chris on the line.
Hey, Chris.
How you doing?
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Good.
You got a question for Mr. South? For George. I feel weird to call Mr. South, even though. But,
yes,
Have you had to endure any backstage politics in your career?
Well, you see a lot of it. I mean, and I mean that's just part of the business. I mean we've always got guys that you think should have got a big push, but they didn't. For whatever reason, and and I just always the opportunity, whether it was doing a job on TV or anything. I just always wanted to keep a job. I mean, I volunteered for stuff. I mean, If, back in the day, it shows my age, is when we would tape shows in Atlanta, they didn't mail the tapes back to Charlotte. They needed to get them to Charlotte, but they was afraid to mail them because they would get lost. And if they got lost, there's no TV show. So for years, I delivered the TV tapes from Atlanta to Dusty's office. And the biggest reason I loved doing it because Dusty had to see my ugly face every Monday morning, Jack, and just to keep your face around, And so, Chris, I thought, just goofy stuff, but you're always, back then especially, you were so worried about, most of the time the guys got fired, they did it themselves. Really. I mean, I wrote my book about an old-timer's chair, and a lot of guys don't even know what I'm talking about, but if an old-timer had a chair and he was sitting in it and he got up, you didn't touch that chair. It may have been a 2-cent metal chair, but you didn't touch it. And you don't know how many guys I've seen come into the territory and go sit in that chair, and they'd be fired right then. You just, I think, matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I think that happened up in WWF with The Undertaker. I think one of those young guys came right in and pushed his stuff out of the way and sit in his chair. That poor kid never made it to TV. So that part of it, Chris, if you really, everybody had a chance. I mean, there was a lot of guys that blowed a lot of chances, and they did it themselves. I always got tickled when I've seen many guys travel to Carolinas from another territory where they were starving, and they would be asked to put another guy over, Jack, and they wouldn't do it. And they'd get fired on the spot. And I always, joke saying, listen, my lady at the bank don't ask how many matches I won, And so that part of it maybe not even been real politics. It just, back then, see, that's what it was just cut and dry back then. You didn't get a chance to work politics because they got rid of you. Honestly, if you was a jerk in the ring, or if you really tried to hurt somebody, or it's what I said earlier when we first started, that you would really weed out a lot of guys, Chris, if it was like it was, because you just didn't stick around. Nobody wanted you around, especially when they spent so much time with you. It's like a player now on a football team. If they, look at poor T.O., bless his heart, he can't get a team to pick him up. And is it his ability, or was it just, his mouth? I mean, honestly, you don't know. And that's the thing in wrestling. You just didn't stick around. So you didn't really back then have time to do any politicking because you'd be gone. And it was really, I'm not saying guys didn't have heat with each other, but you really, really had to depend on each other. And the funny thing that's missing now, guys, and I should have said this earlier, is I know guys back in the day that hated each other to this day, but when they went out to that ring, they had the best match on the card. Because Flair wrote about it in his book, and I quoted him in mine, that it was about what was best for the match. Mm-hmm. It ain't about what's best for George South or what's best for so-and-so. So even then, guys that hated each other, when it come time to go out and draw money, they went out and worked. They went out and did their job. Now, they may have hated each other when it was over. And see, that part, oh, my gosh, I miss so much. So you didn't have to like the guy to make money with him. So I've seen a little bit of that, Chris, but I just, back then there wasn't much politics because you didn't stick around. And you'll always have guys that say that should have been me. I'd heard the story of Johnny Weaver, who was a big name in the Carolinas and, one of the big baby faces here forever, and he worked in the office for years. But, the story is on him that two promoters were talking one day, and they were, their egos were getting involved, and one of them thought they was a better promoter, and he said, I tell you what, the next guy that walks through that door, I'm going to make him a star, no matter who it is. And all of a sudden, the door opened, and Johnny Weaver walked in, And they pushed, and who knows if that's true, but I love to think it was, So you didn't really have a chance. I've seen a lot of big name guys get fired over the stupidest stuff, but you just didn't have time back then. I mean, you had to have that ego and that cockiness, but you didn't have time to play games. Because back then, see, people didn't come. If they didn't like what was going on, the fans didn't come. And if the fans didn't come, you didn't get paid. That's bottom line. You didn't have a check in the mail waiting on you when you got home. So if that angle didn't work, and there's a lot of them that didn't, buddy, you didn't make money next week. And that's the thing. You really depended on them fans more than they depended on us. So I hope that answers your question, Chris.
shoot this. Thanks to yourself. God bless.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in, Chris. Well, we want to let everybody know you go to georgesouthbook.com to pick up Dad, You Don't Work, You Wrestle. Now, is that something one of your kids actually said to you?
Yeah, it sure did. You know, I used to, like most dads, that when I get ready to go out on the road, they'd always, that's when they would be the most rambunctious. I mean, they would want to go on the road with me, and I'd always find, you know, banana peelings or something in my bag where they were eating in my bag or something, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so one night, my twin girls were probably about 6 or 7 years old, and they wouldn't go to sleep or nothing. I mean, they're jumping on the beds, punching holes in the sheetrock, and, you know, Big Dad yelled across the room, "Listen, girls, go to sleep. Your dad's got to go to work." And Abigail, she's a little smart aleck, she said, "Dad, you don't work, you wrestle." I said, "Man, if I ever write a book, that's going to be the greatest title in the world." And, of course, now, you know, the book's doing good. She wants her, you know, royalties off of it. So some things don't never change. But I've had a lot of good feedback on just that name, you know, because, you know how most wrestlers are. It's always, you know, I was the greatest shooter in the world, or, you know, I drew more money than you did. But and it's just neat how this whole thing came together. You know, Debbie Joel, who I'd actually, guys, showing my age, me and her that dated in high school, if you can believe it. And for 30 years, I didn't even know where she was at or anything. And she actually had that picture in the book of us in high school.
Uh-huh.
And you know what's funny? Here's how people think. In high school, 1980, you got to dress up on 50s Day. So we're all got the hair slicked back, looking like Happy Days. Well, everybody that's read the book sees that picture, and they think that I was, like, going to school with her in 1950.
Right.
You know? So I want to make that clear right now. You know, that was 1980, okay? But, and it just came together, and she's always wanted to do a book, and she's real good on the computer and stuff, so I'm real indebted to her, too. I mean, one night, you know, just one day, she said, "Just read me something off of a napkin." And honestly, here's me, you know, I don't slow down for nothing. I didn't know it would take time for this. I read her just a note off a napkin, something I wrote in 1985. And she typed it in like 5 seconds. I mean, it's the greatest thing I said, "What did you just do?" She said, "Well, give me something else." And I thought, wait a second, it can be done like that? You know? So my hat was off to her, too, because we butt heads a lot, too, on her just, you know, when you're reading it off and you want it to go a certain way, and they're thinking, you know, you want it in your words, but you don't want to sound like a goofball either, which I do that a lot anyway. But so it's just neat how all this come together, and I just appreciate everybody that's got their hands on it, because it's doing real good. And, you know, what I want to be able to do is go to these shows, and a lot of people wanted autograph. I'm able to give it to them and get their feedback right then, and so it's doing great, and I'm very appreciative.
Mm-hmm. And I am very proud to have mine autographed by George South.
Well, buddy, I'm telling you, I may ask you for a royalty check, because not only do you have my book, one of the first ones, I've even got an In Your Head patch on my ring jacket.
I was very proud to see that, and I was very proud to see that you had mentioned in the book. And it was a great picture of George South and Matt Hardy, and he's got an In Your Head patch right on the top.
Well, guys, I think the world of y'all. I do a lot of radio stuff, and I tell you, y'all just always respected the business, and you know, it just you can tell it. I mean, I sit down, you know, I put that religious professor in there. He's just trying to, you know, I mean, honestly, what can you expose on wrestling that hadn't been exposed? I mean, honestly. So, you know, these guys, they try to, it's like a wrestling. The fans try to be the match now. And it's no different when you do radio. You know, I've had, you know, guys that want to interview me start telling me about their life story. So I'll just start asking them questions to be a smart aleck, you know? So, but I just appreciate y'all guys. You're always so, you know, just so great to let me come on. And I was so excited about this one. You know, I done went through about 12 Mountain Dews, so I'm going to have to run to the store, I guess.
I have to run to the bathroom first. So.
Yeah.
But has anyone guessed who the oiled-up wrestler was who dropped you on your head?
You know what? I am going to do well, I may reveal it here. Nobody has guessed that. Now, they've sent several. What's funny is when they send some guesses in, and these guys, I'm thinking, what era was you watching wrestling? This guy never even lifted weights, much less put baby oil on. So that's kind of a neat thing, and I am good friends with that guy to this day. But I think if you thought about it at that time period, you could probably guess. And that's the part. I've even had people say, well, you should have revealed that. There's a couple stories you tell about where you don't mention it. And I didn't want to mention some of the stuff. I want people to please think just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because if you thought, on some of that stuff, you could, and of course, Devil Blue, I had to reveal his name because that was the first beating I ever took in a wrestling ring. But he's probably going to start getting bookings out of it because I've had people say that they've looked Devil Blue up on YouTube. So I'm saying, hold on, I'm trying to further my career, not his. So if you see Devil Blue at WrestleMania next year, I'm going to be hot. That's all I'm saying. They told me Vader came out, what was it, last night, Monday night? So
yeah, you
never know.
He was one of the most over guys on the show.
Ain't that something? I love that. So you never know.
Do you think that says something, though, about a lot of the current guys? Is they're always trying to bring back, they try to bring back Brock Lesnar. Yeah. They're trying to get Austin back for next year.
Yeah.
Even, Kane, they bring him back. Undertaker. I mean, all like the guys from another era. They're like the ones that they keep trying to bring back.
Well, and I love that. It's like me listening to Journey. My favorite band. They're the only band that made my book. But it's almost like we all, even me, we want to be reminded of simpler times. And sometimes it may be just Jimmy Snuka coming out. Those guys will always, it's almost like you look at them at a different era or on a different level. Now, these guys are stars, much bigger stars now. And, I'm good friends with Dustin Rhodes, and he always, he makes me laugh because he'll always, put something on his little Facebook or some little gimmick thing about if anybody sees my brother Cody, would you punch him? Because, Dustin's making light of Cody's made more money in 6 months than what Dustin's made in the whole career, Yeah. So those guys are big stars, but it's like they don't have that one thing that makes people when Jake Roberts, I don't care. When Jake Roberts walks to the ring to this day, people stand up to look at him, And that's what I think is so neat. And when the Vaders come out and, Two Core Scorpio up in New Jersey done his finish, that flip, and people went crazy. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's like you hang on, and I do. Oh, my goodness. I to see Steamboat and them just, do anything that I don't know. It just makes you think of how simple things were. And I'd heard that Vader got over just like a road warrior animal. You let that music start and he walks out, and it's just, man, it's just something that's there. And those guys were really, really over with the people. You didn't have to brag about it. It's like an old gunslinger movie. If a guy was a good gunslinger, he didn't have to brag about it. You about knew he'd done shot some people, So these guys, you knew they'd draw some money. They didn't have to walk around and brag about it. And, I saw that with, I was able to sit in on Great Muda's training seminar up in New Jersey. And Muda's unbelievable. All those years, he took real good care of guys doing that moonsault. And his knees are in pretty bad shape. But, man, when that bell rings, it was unbelievable. But you know what was a neat moment for me? I'd shared in my book that Great Muda's first match ever in the Carolinas with Gary Hart was against me. Mm-hmm. I had his first match. So I go up to Muda in New Jersey. And, if you think I talk funny now, you'll hear me trying to get Muda to understand me, and he's got his interpreter there, but I just told Muda that. And believe it or not, Muda remembered the town. It was Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, I'm not saying he remembered me. I'm not saying that. But he remembered that town that he made his debut in. And this is 25 years ago. I just thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
For him to, he's done all this stuff, and for him to remember that where he made his debut with Gary Hart. But, buddy, when he went out there and that night in New Jersey, it was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. I mean, he spit that, and all he done was spit the green mist, and the place went crazy, So it's just those neat little things. And you got some guys, bless their heart, that will try everything, no matter how many gimmicks you give them. They're doing that with, and I can say this because they can't fire me, but they did that with Blackjack's grandsons, Rotundo's boys. These are big, big. They know their
guys really put him over too. Like Austin's always saying how such a great worker he is, and almost like the veteran guys. I don't know why he's not even on TV.
And they changed his name 8 times already.
Yeah,
and. They started out, I think maybe Hoss Mulligan was one of them. I kind of love that because everybody knew they were Mulligan's grandsons. And, oh, my goodness, you're thinking, what are the – I don't know. It's like not seeing the dadburn forest for the trees, but you don't have to do anything. You know, that's why I'm hoping with little Ricky. I hope when he if he gets moved up and gets to working some shows, I hope they, you don't know nowadays. You know, they may change his name and shave his head and everything else, but you just hope they keep what people know. I think they've done that with British Bulldogs kid, Davy Smith's kid, too, I think. I think they changed his name to some goofy name, too, for a while.
Made him a cowboy for a little while.
Yeah. And, fans, I mean, I get mad at the fans, too, but they're not stupid, and they think, wait a second. If that's Blackjack's grandson, you may not have to make him a cowboy, but, we know he's a Wyndham. Come on. So,
what was really weird was Henning's kid, because they changed his name to McGillicuddy, but yet they always talked about him being Mr. Perfect's son, the grandson of Larry the Axe Henning. And I was like, well, what is the purpose of changing the name if you're still saying he's the son of – just say he's,
That's right. And what's funny, it ain't like, back in our day, if your son started, which I loved it, they would put a mask on him and let him work the territory for a while under a mask till he learned some experience, and, of course, Reed, that's what we did with Reed for a little bit too, and which helped out a lot. But it gives the guys a chance to learn. It gives the guys a chance to mess up a little bit, and I kind of love that part of it. They don't, of course, they don't do that. I mean, for a while there, they were having second-generation guys everywhere. I think it was
almost more second-generation guys than people that weren't related to somebody.
And, Ted DiBiase, he's got like 2 or 3 sons. They're all, and it's neat because, I think of Randy Orton, those guys, it's just like you didn't have to teach them anything. They was around it, and they know how the business works, and, they all turned out to be good.
Mm-hmm. I know, was it Zan Panzer? That was Brett.
Brad Anderson.
I didn't even know that was him until, not too long ago when we had him on the show.
Yeah, it sure was. And he learned. He gives that a lot of credit to, you're able to mess up. That's what's happened now with a lot of these second-generation guys. You got to have that time period where you're allowed to mess up without everybody looking at you through a telescope, and even, that's why with Steamboat Jr., Little Ricky, I had him almost a year before everybody even knew he was in the business. And I was able to take him to some of these shows around here and wrestle him first match. And you look right at him and tell him he's a steamboat. But before the internet or anything really got a hold of it, he'd done been to Japan twice and really no pressure, because, my son, I'm nobody, honestly, guys. You know me, I'm just down to earth. But my son had a lot of pressure, and he turned out to be a good worker. And I can't imagine not that I'm their level of Steamboat or Flair, but I can imagine what their kids went through. Yeah. And I've heard stories here in the Carolinas when Reed was on the wrestling team in high school and Little Ricky was on the opposite team. They would wrestle each other sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you would have fans in the audience taking sides, like it was their dad, And I'm thinking, these poor kids.
Uh-oh. I think we lost George here.
No, that ain't good. His phone run out of batteries.
It could have. That could have.
Huh. Yeah. Should we take a break or just wrap it up?
We'll try to get back up and wrap it up here with him quick.
Okie dokie. Well, we'll take a break for a moment and we'll be right back.
This is Ox Bacon. You just heard me. And remember the saying, be nice and sweet to all the people you meet as you go through life laddering down. The same folks you meet on your way up, you got to talk to them on your way back down. Thank you for listening. I know you enjoyed yourself. If you want to send me thank you letters, that's quite all right. Just come August 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. We might even carry over to the 6th and talk to Ox Bacon.
All right, and we're back once again, and we got George South back. We actually killed his phone.
Yes, we did. Hey, I'm still putting things over, okay? I had to put the phone over, but I'm sorry about that. Man, I done wore it out. I think y'all asked me one question about 3 hours ago, and I've been going ever since.
Well, I think we were just, you were wrapping up there about, Richie Steamboat.
Yeah. Well, and I just wanted to close with him. Is just, he was very unique because I was able to take him around, and he was able to mess up some, and before anybody really got a hold and put a telescope on him, he'd went to Japan twice and, went to Harley races for 6-8 months. So he really had a lot of experience, even before he went. I think that's what Jerry Briscoe's doing with his son now, just letting him get out and travel and work different places and different styles. And that's always a good thing. But I was able to do that with little Ricky, as I was saying, before he ever really had any pressure on him. So there's got to be a lot of pressure on these kids.
Mm-hmm. Basically Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat. It's like most people consider them like the two best in-ring wrestlers of like the last 20 or 30 years, or maybe Terry Funk or somebody like that. So it has to be that would be a lot of pressure on somebody.
Yeah, and I've told people, Reed and even David is, your dad's Ric Flair, and I know how intimidated I was when I was several times. I'd be training Reed and little Ricky Steamboat at the same time, and their dad's both dads are standing at ringside. And you don't think that's intimidating when ain't nobody else in the building but us. And man, oh my goodness, as their trainer, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, guys, please don't mess up, because their dads are looking at me. But so that's very intimidating. So I can imagine what it was for their sons. But there'll never be another Ric Flair. It's like Michael Jordan. He owns our basketball team here in town, who's horrifying, our NBA team, and it's like they're all blaming Michael Jordan, and he's telling them in every interview, he says, listen, you're not going to find another Michael Jordan. And he don't mean to be cocky. He's just saying, quit looking,
right.
And that's what people are doing here, especially because they're waiting for that for 5 Michael Jordans to come out, and that's not going to happen. And I don't think there'll ever be, I think Steamboat was probably the last true baby face. He always wanted to, but he never worked heel. They used to tell him that they could give him a chainsaw and let him kill people, and they'd still cheer him. He was that over as a baby face. And now, Paul Jones used to tell me that the only reason fans care about you turning bad is they cared about you when you were good. Mm-hmm. And that makes so much sense because, especially in WCW, they turn like Lex every week. They turn Sting every week, back and forth. Big Show, you don't know which one he is this week. And, and it don't mean nothing.
No, it loses all its, any kind of importance if they're going all the time. And if you're really into them as a babyface, and then all of a sudden they're a bad guy, then it's like, oh man, I'm emotionally attached to this, and I'm going to be upset.
And most of them, honestly, that they turned, that nobody cared about them to begin with. That's what's sad, and it's like they didn't put no time or no effort into them to begin with, and they think, well, we'll just turn them, heel or babyface, and maybe that'll help.
Sometimes it's not even like really a turn. They're just all of a sudden
what's hard? You don't know who was who to begin with.
Yeah.
You don't know who the heel or babyface is now. I don't. Up in New Jersey, me and Jack Manning were sitting at the gimmick table, and we were just kind of playing a game between us. Each match that came out, trying to determine between us who the babyface was. I still don't know. The babyface supposedly comes out to this gothic, I done killed everybody ring music, and it's funny now to even do an appearance with Jimmy Vaggett, the Boogie Woogie Man at our book signings, and they'll play his ring music for him to come out, and I still see people get up and dance. Jack, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. He's been coming out the same ring music for 40 years. But it just makes people want to get up and dance, And I said, man, I got to start using that ring music. Because, most of these shows, it's just these guys, I don't know. I was thinking, what in the world? Lord knows, don't let the music not play because they won't even go to the ring. Let me tell you that right now. So anyway, that's all.
I'd ask you a quick question, too, about, because that was Legends of the Ring in New Jersey, and actually a friend of mine, Brandon, he said if he knew I would have went with him, he would have picked me up and took me. But anyway, they had a Vince Russo U-shoot there, the live U-shoot. Have you ever had any interaction with Vince Russo, and, do you have any thoughts on him?
Well, I've met him, and I like him. And you're going to say, George, you like everybody. But
he is
the thing I liked about Vince is, he wrote 2 books. A lot of people don't know this. He wrote the first one, well, he may have known out, but the 2 I'm talking about was identical book. He wrote the first one, the old Vince Russo, and he really said some stuff about guys But he, and I truly believe this, he had a confrontation with the Lord. I really believe that he really changed his life. Now, you say, George, he's got you fooled or whatever, but I really believe that Vince Russo, see, God can change anything. I mean, God can change any man's heart. So Vince goes back and rewrites this book the same way, but where he said something negative or something, he kind of changed it and really apologized. And what was really making me mad, guys, is nobody even talked about that book. As a matter of fact, I even think the title of it's maybe Forgiven, I think, or something is the title of it. But nobody even said one word about that book. And he basically done what no wrestler's ever done, just said, guys, I apologize. And, you know, you say, well, George, that don't make things right. He said some stuff or did some stuff or whatever. I really believe, and I could be wrong, I'll be the first to admit it if it ends up I am, but I really believe that wrestling is not the number one thing in his life right now. Now, you can say, yeah, right, George, and what I think he was released from TNA or something, I don't know, but I said all that to say it's amazing to me, and I remember me and Jake Roberts talked about this, I think we're all expected to die in a motel room. And I don't mean that ugly, Jack. I mean that, buddy, that I think that's what fans think, that you're supposed to go out as a hero. You're supposed to die, you know? And when a guy stops in the middle of everything and says, I'm just going to try to do better, it's like the fans don't want to believe it, you know? And I don't know. Maybe I'm not answering the question, but I like the man. I really believe. People say, well, you don't know his heart. And I tell people, no, and y'all don't know my heart. Only God knows your heart. And I just, I like his second book, just because in our business, nobody ever says they're sorry. Nobody. I've seen people run people's families and homes, but for anybody to do that, but it didn't, it just probably made it to the dollar bin because nobody ever talked about it. And it goes back to what we said, but I like him. I do. And regardless of, the business is one thing, but I really believe, Nikita even told me, Nikita Koloff, that he had it when he was going up making some appearances for TNA. He had a talk with, Vince, and Vince just come to everybody, you come to that place in your life where you realize there's got to be more. And I just, that's the thing. If I'm messing up, I tell people, pray for me. Helping me by telling me all the stuff I'm doing wrong ain't helping me, and that's what our business does. They're quick to, I just, you can say, well, I always talk about my friends that have passed away, and you just wish it hadn't happened, and you say, George, this, you blame whatever you want to blame. The truth is, they're gone. And I always wish that I could have done something. I write in my book about a couple of weeks before Adrian Adonis, who I thought was just unbelievable in the ring. I mean, they can say, put that little gay gimmick on him all they want, but he was still one heck of a worker to be a big man. And
yeah, he was. He could take all kinds of bumps and move. Oh,
he was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Man, I've got that match from Southwest when they tried to bring back that NWA World Belt where they had a little tournament.
Oh yeah, it's like Luthez, yeah.
Yeah, and man, it's unbelievable. I mean, he was just unbelievable. He was taking Harley Race's bumps before we ever knew what they were, But he came in WCW one time. He'd been out of work, and I write about it in the book. He walked in the dressing room, walked right by us, and went in, whatever, had a meeting, turned around, walked right back out, and I never seen him again. I didn't say a word to him then. So I'm not perfect. I messed up. I wished I'd have just introduced myself maybe. He, probably could have cared less, but I just wish I'd have, I don't know. If I could have just, I don't know, gave him something positive there or something. I don't know. That's always stuck with me. And I never want that to happen again. I write in my book that I just recently sent Ole Anderson a Bible. And ain't no secret in wrestling how Ole feels about a Bible. But, Gene passed away, his partner, and I never got to do anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to do that. Now, Ole he may be using it to set his tea glass on or keep his front door propped open. I don't know. But I wanted to do something. And that's the one thing all these guys, my time with Eddie Gilbert is priceless. That guy that asked me earlier in our interview about my museum and what's priceless. It's stuff that I can't hold, being with Eddie Gilbert, Eddie Guerrero, Big Boss Man, Ray Traylor, talking to him on the phone right before he passed. I mean, those are special things that, you know, I wish I remember to put all that in the book. But those are neat things that you can't put a price tag on, you know. And, you know, my all-time story is visiting Wahoo, you know, in the hospital when he had got sick and get to spend time with him. I mean, my goodness. As a little old kid laying on the floor watching wrestling, that's very special to me. So I like Vince. To answer your question, I'm sorry.
No,
but Vince, I like him. I really believe that, you know, he can really take wrestling or leave it. Yeah, you'll do it but you know, even when he was with TNA these last couple of years, he didn't cause a bunch of stink. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just quietly did his job. And I don't think the wrestling fans like that, to be honest with you. But I just always thought it was amazing that second book that he wrote, where he basically just apologized to a lot of guys in the business. Nobody ever said a word about that book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a neat book. But anyway, I just think it's neat for someone to just say, hey, I messed up and I'm sorry for what I did. Because in our business, you know that. Nobody says that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I like him a lot. I didn't get to sit in on that, but I liked him a lot. Because, you know, in our business, I know guys, honestly, I've talked on it tonight, I know guys that hold grudges. You know, when I saw Sweet Hansen and Rip Hall, who was one of the meanest tag teams in the Carolinas, I mean, they were just, you know, the Dudley Boys of the 50s. I mean, they were just vicious. And we had done a reunion, one of the first reunions ever, in Charleston, South Carolina. They were going to bring Sweet and Rip back together. First time in 35 years they'd seen each other or even talked. And we're all sitting around. I mean, man, there was legends everywhere, and everybody was wondering what's going to happen when these two guys meet. And, buddy, when they met, I wish I'd have had a camera, Jack, because they both started crying, and they both hugged each other.
Oh.
And the funny thing was they couldn't remember. They couldn't remember what they got mad about. So 35 years had passed, but they got to you know what I'm saying? They got to make it right. And I love Tony Atlas's story about Pez Watley, that him and Pez didn't get along with, but before Pez died, you know, Tony got to talk with him, and they made things right. And that's kind of neat, you know, in my own little perfect world. You know, I used to tell Paul Jones that I'm going to buy me an old motel, I'm going to fix it up, and I'm going to just let old wrestlers live there. And Paul said, yeah, we'd kill each other. You know, and he's probably right. But in my little world, you know, I try to hold on to that, and I would probably try that. But Paul's probably right. They'd probably kill each other. So, but it's funny to hear some old timers say, well, so-and-so tried to stretch me in 1940, and I ain't never forgot it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, how do you even remember that? You know?
That's what I was wondering about when at the last Fan Fest there, when we talked about, really not forget his name, but the guy who you know, known for exposing the business. I thought
Eddie Mansfield.
Yeah, I was wondering like if some of the older guys would, you know, try to do something to him, because I just figured he's probably still like hated by a lot of the people.
Yeah, well, you know what a lot of fans don't know, and I was in there, I was part of it, is that actually, as bad as it was, it helped the business. Believe it or not, the attendance, if you look back at the records, attendance doubled after he did that. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wish somebody would have said that night in front of him. He did it to kill wrestling, but it turned around and backfired because fans started going more to see if it was true what he was saying.
Right.
You know, and I thought that was but nobody ever talked about that, but the business actually did better and for a long time.
That's when it really started to take off, yeah.
Yeah, and
like
so I'm thinking, man, I wish somebody would expose it again right now. I need to buy something for my kids, you know? So he hated that, and I don't even know if anybody ever told him that, but it's been proven that that's what, like you said, that's when it took off, because people started going that wasn't even going, saying, did they really do that? Trying to catch us, you know, and doing it. And so a lot of the guys that may have hated him still probably hate him, but they made some money. They made some money off that. You know, and it didn't get, you know, what was so funny about the whole thing, he didn't get one booking out of that. Right. I think he done the 2020 thing, and it shut it down.
Yeah, I think he kind of got blackballed from wrestling after that.
He sure did. And what's so funny is it's so bad that even like talk shows didn't even want him, you know?
Yeah.
And so he didn't make, it was just sad. And that's why there ain't many books out there, but my book, and I think Jimmy Valiant's book, and there's a couple other ones that, there's a certain thing, and I'm sure in everybody's profession there's certain things that you'll never get out of me. And I don't care if I'm broke, living in a desert. There's just things that was between the boys that should always be just between the guys. And I always respected that. I'm not stupid enough to think if I take my little kids to the circus that there's not things that the circus people do. And my kids get mad at me because I love taking them to these little cheap carnivals. I love going to these little cheap carnivals in these malls, parking lots, because all they do is they're better workers than we are, And I love going in there and trying to figure out how they're trying to work me. And my kids hate it because I won't never let them play no games because I know how they work, My kids hate going to the carnival with me because I'll expose the business. I'm like an Eddie Mansfield of the carnival scene, see? And my kids hate it. Said, Dad, I'll go if you'll just shut up. But I just love it because they got, the carny people's got their own little language, and they see somebody coming, and it's just neat how, and they're like the old timey wrestlers. If they don't make no money that night, they don't eat. And I just love how and I do it sometimes. I will spend $20 for a little, $2 stuffed animal.
Right. You play dime toss after dime toss, or not dime toss.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Toss, but,
yeah, and they give you a little dart, to pop the balloons, and the end of the dart's bent slightly to the right, so you can't never throw it straight, And I said, man, they're better at their stuff than we are. So.
And you are like, say, you wear a little teddy bear or something that you probably could have bought for a couple bucks.
Or go to I tell my kids, let me just run you by the dollar store and buy y'all all the stuffed bears you want. And they say, oh, no, Daddy, it's not the same thing. You got to spend $30 for one, And so I laugh. So I've given in a little bit this year and just even my kids, they'll go with me now because I won't expose the business once I walk in. So I'm like a big mark of the carnival scene.
I think I dated myself when I said the dime toss because I don't know how much it now.
Yeah, it would have to be a quarter now. I don't think a dime would work, but I love how they do it because they know, if they don't make any money, there's no check waiting on them, and they go to the next town and they pack up. And I'm always amazed because we'll do a lot of wrestling shows at these things and how quick these guys pack up. I think they all should be working for like WWF. You talking about taking down a stage and taking down a ring? Yeah. These guys are unbelievable.
I guess I always have fun at the WWE shows, and just watching like in between like the breaks. If they'll do something, they'll roll down the whole, put up like a whole set in the ring if they're doing like a talk show or whatever it is, and I'm always just watching, like amazed how they could do it in like a
Me too.
minute.
The stars of the show are those people. You watch. A couple of years ago, they don't happen much now, but they'll have a ring break, right in the middle of the match. And it's unbelievable how quick they get that rope changed, to get another rope on that ring. And I know how hard something like that is, but you're right. It's just amazing. Those people are and I even wrote about that in the book, that the first time I went, it was like an anthill that you'd stepped on. There were so many people for WWF, but everybody knew what their job was. And it's so neat how it just all come together. But, yeah, there's a show even before the show starts.
Yeah.
I remember the wildest thing I'd ever seen is, remember that angle they done where it was Big Boss Man against Al Snow, and they did the big blow-off match in the cage here in Charlotte where they had these dogs around the ring?
Kennel in the cell, yeah.
Yes. And I'll never forget that afternoon, I took my kids over there to meet some of the guys, and they kept saying, the dogs are here, the dogs are here. And they said, okay. They said, Vince will be here in a minute. So they go out here in this empty building, and they have all these dogs around the ring, and here comes Vince. And Vince wants to see how vicious these dogs are. So they got like 30 dogs, and they can't even get these dogs to bark. And, they're throwing stuff at them, and punching them, and these dogs are the calmest dogs I've ever seen. And I thought Vince McMahon was going to have a heart attack. And I'm thinking, man, I thought these poor dogs getting ready to get fired. And they actually, them dogs, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the lights or the building, but they, out of 30 dogs, none of them dogs could, Vince is wanting these ones with rabies, foaming at the mouth. Mm-hmm. And they actually, buddy, don't tell me WWF ain't strict. They actually took those dogs out of there and brought more in, And, of course, the angle I don't think did too good. The match didn't do that good.
No,
I think they still got the dogs to, like, bark or anything.
No, I think one of them on the live pay-per-view, you can see it, like, they go into and it just, like, starts taking, like, a dump on the side of the ring.
Well, I guess the concept on paper was good, but, man, I remember we're standing there watching it, and they couldn't get them dogs to even, like, whimper. I mean, they're all laying down, taking a nap, and, kick back and thinking, man, it's a pretty easy payoff. But they shipped them out of there and brought some more in, but I don't think it ever worked. But
All right. We've had a lot of false finishes this interview.
We did a few dusty finishes, too, I think.
I think so. So, again, go to GeorgeSouthBook.com. Links right on the website. Get yourself Dad, You Don't Work, You Wrestle. And if you get to see George South in person, he'll sign it for you. And, of course, mention in your head. Maybe he'll give you a little special signature.
Yeah, that's right. I'll special autograph that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, thank you, Jack. Hey, thank you, Jack, for taking up half my time, too, okay?
Itcher and I were kind of going back and forth on that. We're like, I think this turned into the New Jack show.
No, I love it. You just tell me when he's on again. I'll see when he's on, and I'm going to call in and talk.
All right. That sounds good.
Yeah. But, guys, I appreciate y'all so much, and I know I'm going to see y'all down the road, but I hate I'm not going to see you this year in Fan Fest, but hopefully they'll get it back up, and next year we'll all, I'll get to see you. But just thank y'all so much, guys. I know I've been on here running my mouth about everything under the sun, but just appreciate talking to y'all, and just thank y'all so much for helping me, just talk about my book for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, we appreciate coming on. Anytime you want to come on, you're always welcome.
Well, thank you guys so much, and y'all have a great, great night, okay?
You too.
This is Raging Bullman Fernandez, and you're listening In Your Head. And if you guys want to know true stories about wrestling and great individuals you want to talk to and find out more about some of the old legends of wrestling, stay tuned for this.